Welcome to episode 10 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week, we're going to be talking about everything that happened during ANZAC Round, as a special round that it is. Talk about Melbourne completely tearing Richmond apart in the second half. Talk about the absolute thriller that was Collingwood and Essendon. Talk about GWS absolutely taking Brisbane to town up in Canberra and all the rest of the exciting matches, including the coast to coast match between Gold Coast and West Coast. So come along for the ride and let's get into it. How are you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Not too bad, not too bad. Just getting ready for my trip away. Going to be deserting football for a round, so
You
I'm
are.
very keen to wrap this week up, see where football will be left, and pick back up on it. Because unfortunately, I'm going to bad code territory in New South Wales,
Oh yeah.
above the Bricey line. So it's going
Not
to be a bit.
not much AFL activity over there.
Nah. Plus, my friends aren't sports fans.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Uh,
gonna be leaving that. But
that's fair enough.
excited to wrap it all up.
Sounds good. My week has been alright, you know. I have to think about the future now, that knowing that I have to get a special guest in for next week's episode, and then I have to help you prepare for me being away for 2 weeks.
Yeah. We'll get things sorted. It'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Maybe, unless I tank the podcast.
Nah, you'll be fine.
Nah.
If you have any issues, like, I'm not that hard to reach.
If you just find the podcast upside down in the ditch,
Yeah.
don't say I didn't warn you.
All right, shall we get started on the round then? In that case,
Yes. Let's go.
let's talk about Wednesday night, Anzac Eve. It's crazy. 5 days worth of footy to talk about.
I know.
So, the traditional Anzac Eve clash between Richmond and Melbourne at the MCG. There were 72-ish thousand people, I believe. I was one of them. For at least half of the game, it was a good game to watch. Until Melbourne just tore us apart. But, kind of how it is. So the scores were 5-12-42 to 13-7-85. This was Melbourne's fifth straight Anzac Eve win. Also, just before I keep going, I want to apologize if I sound a little snotty and gross. I am currently just getting over a cold. It's not pleasant, but is what it is.
It's all good.
Max Gawn won the Frank Checker Hughes medal, and stats kind of show why. He finished with 23 touches, 74% efficiency, 16 contested, 10 marks, 5 clearances, and 5 score involvements. I believe he also finished with like 33 hitouts, most of them to advantage.
26.
Oh, 26. I knew it was a high number, but it wasn't that high. But I know most
still
of them
more
were
than
to
Nate
advantage.
Davis and Naismith combined.
Yeah.
So he had a very prolific night.
Jake Lever and Stephen May both had pretty much full control in the back line. They were pretty undefeated. They finished with 26 and 23 touches, 80.8% and 95.7% efficiency respectively. Combined 22 marks, 3 clearances, and 7 score involvements.
That was pretty.
I mean, there's a reason why we kicked 12 behinds.
Yeah, they made it pretty tough for most of the entries during the night, and said it's a bit hard for Richmond with, as I said, the tools that they got on the park to really work that defense thin or spread them out a bit. But
don't have many options right now.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Going to be the case for a while.
For the most part, they at least said brought the effort to at least get the contest scrappy, which is how Richmond just sort of got to go this year.
Yeah, I mean, make the best of what we can, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Rookie Daniel Turner for the Demons started in the second half after being very, very quiet in the first half. He finished with 3 goals, 6 score involvements, and 6 inside 50s. So for a young forward, that's very, very impressive.
I'll break the game.
Yeah, exactly. Like he became their forward target when their other targets were being completely shut down. So credit to him. Credit to Goody for moving the magnets around. Um, for the Tigers, young winger Hugo Ralphsmith had a strong game, finishing with 21 touches, 11 contested, 4 clearances, 4 score involvements, and 16 pressure acts. Um, he started in the 22, and they put McIntosh as the starting sub, which I think was actually better because as he's gotten older in age, he's losing his pace. So
Yeah,
if you're able to use what strong pace he has later in a
in a shorter
match
amount of
in a
time.
shorter
Yeah,
amount of time, he has a better involvement. Which despite it being pretty rough in the second half, I thought he still did have a fairly consistent game, despite only coming in the third.
yeah. You see other clubs doing it, like Nick Hind for Essendon. As I said, I've never been a huge advocate for Hindy, but it's the same mindset. Get a fast player late in the game. Even rough disposals doesn't matter. You just need that speed and execution.
Yeah, as long as you have that run and pace, especially for
Yeah,
a wing position, that's very important. Um,
exactly.
Young midfielder Thompson Dow, I thought also had a really, really strong game.
Oh
He
yeah, he
finished
was
with
good.
22 touches, 77.3% efficiency, 10 contested, 3 score involvements, 8 tackles, and 18 pressure acts. He was very, very much on ball. He's very much getting into all the packs that he could throughout the midfield. And I was very impressed with how he's developing as a young player. Um, Side note, I also want to mention Morris Rioli Jr. He's been having a really, really good season, despite, our wins and losses not really equating to that. I'm very impressed with the role that Uze's put him in, and I hope that he can continue to develop. He starts to get a little more speed, which is, what the Riolis are known for, is their speed and their pace. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully one day he'll be as successful as Daniel, which will be very nice to
Yeah,
see.
oh, sure.
Yeah, overall, Melbourne showed why they are in contention this year, and you can't fault them. They looked really, really good in that second half. The first half was a very, very tough fight, and
Yeah,
I'm proud of us for at least getting out in front by halftime. Like it was 1 point, but we were still in front.
yeah, exactly. And as I said, even like Melbourne's still main issue of forward line function in terms of their tools, still not quite there. But I thought Richmond actually did good defending with the tools that they had. But yeah, as I said, it's just Melbourne. When you don't have those tall targets, you look at the spread, and when they're going good, they just have contributors all around the ground, kicking goals here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Petrarca got his goal. Max Gawn did. Uh, Caleb Windsor chipped in. So, as I said, it's it's not the only team with a few minor forward lines problems, but yeah, that back line and normally their midfield is a bit quiet, but they still won
Yeah,
clearances and obviously hit outs. So yeah, as I said, it's still a very good looking Melbourne side. There are like very minor question marks, but that's when you're splitting hairs between who you think's the top of the competition at the moment.
yeah. I
They're
mean,
definitely above the pack.
yeah, they're at least top six material. Whether because of their forward line issues, it's debatable on whether they're fully top four material.
I still think they've shown like consistency. They should be able to provide or get that, 16, 17 wins and is nowadays to get top four, but
Something like that.
we'll see. Takes a bad run sometimes, but I think the best thing for them was when they did have that few defensive injuries and they were like, well, their other lines aren't, they've got May out, their other lines aren't exactly firing. Will they stay? And the answer was yes. And yeah, as I said, anything it's on. It would have to take a very, very big dip in form for me to not think Melbourne are going to be contenders this year.
Yeah.
Or
No,
real contenders, I should say.
I mean it's still early in the season. We're not even halfway yet. Got plenty of time.
Yeah, exactly. But, Melbourne have that history behind them as well.
Yeah, exactly right.
Being good for this bit of the decade. They get a bit of props from that.
Yeah. And then on the injury front, there was only one injury. It was unfortunately to Jacob Hopper yet again.
Mm.
Thankfully, it wasn't as big of an injury as he did earlier in the season, so he's only going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks, which isn't too bad. It's funny though. We subbed him out in the third. He was the leading possession holder,
Yeah, that's right. I
and
remember
at
that.
the end of
Yeah.
the game, he was still the leading possession holder for Richmond. He was equal with
Yeah,
Rioli,
23. Yeah,
which is
exactly. Yeah, it was
crazy.
actually really funny. And you were like 3 clearances, 8 contested possession. He was in the contest a
He was
lot.
doing exactly what
Uh,
we have him for, and he looked good doing it. It shows how
yeah,
important
for
he has
sure.
become to our midfield structure.
Yeah, there's a couple of GWS players from that got traded out from that. One we'll talk about later that had a pretty good performance. It's just shame that Hoppers was capped off after a very good half.
Yeah, it's unlucky. But it happens. Hopefully they'll get it right, and it'll be all good to come back.
Yeah.
All right, shall we talk about the big Anzac Day clash?
Oh, I
The
reckon.
big traditional
Um,
Anzac Day clash.
the big traditional went up Thursday afternoon in front of an electric crowd. Pretty much packed as these contests get. It's always a bit of a crap shoot. How many seats end up vacant? But I think it was the second highest turnout or something for I don't know. It's one of the yeah. It was a very good crowd.
Well, I know this round
Um,
overall is the one of the second highest crowd
yeah. Now that I
margin
think about it, I think
ever.
that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, as I said, it was a good crowd. Sorry about that. I just got my wires a bit crossed. And yeah, it was a tough fought contest. And although it was a very high turnover game, both teams took their claims on it, and it was both in different ways. Essendon through the stoppages, and Collingwood off half forward pressure. While the Dons got off to a very hot start, kicking 4 goals in 4 minutes, Collingwood would claw back through some turnovers, deep entries, and a heck of a lot of behinds. The arm wrestles would take close for the half, with both defences leaking a few easy goals out the back and from the contest.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as they were trying to both aim for the result, Langford and Myercheck missed shots that would get either team the win, and they ended up splitting the points for the round. 12-13, 85. Repeat that for Collingwood. Zach Merritt won the ANZAC medal with his 31 disposals, 6 clearances, 9 tackles, and 10 score involvements. And yeah, there was a few others that were sort of up there for contending. I'd say that the higher performers were very good that day. Yeah, you had for Collingwood, Nick Dacos. Obviously, we'll talk about him in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew McGrath absolutely got a lot of the pill. Darcy Parish was excellent in the concert.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one probably shot converted from Carl Langford or who I just mentioned, Brody Myercheck,
Yeah.
that would have gotten them the medal.
Yeah.
As I said,
100%.
it felt like it was going to get given by a defining moment. It just never happened. But it was a very entertaining contest.
Yeah, absolutely. The big standout for me, and I assume for a lot of people from this game, is the big mark that Jamie Elliott took over Ben Mackay's head.
Ah, beautiful.
God, that's gotta be mark of the year, like hands
It's
down.
gotta
From
be.
what we've seen so far this season, I think that's hands down the best one.
I will give a small knock to Jamie Elliott. Doing it this early in the season, it's a bit of a commentary buzzkill because you see excellent marks in
Yeah,
later,
and then
and it's like, oh, it's really good, but it's not going to win mark of the year, and it's like, let me enjoy that mark. I wish we could like just postpone that mark till later in the
to
season,
like
but
round right at the very end.
exactly, but yeah, very unfortunate they don't give away prizes anymore because I think he would be soft booking it in.
Mm.
Might be looking to upgrade his old car. They used to get a car from it. But yeah, as I said, it was absolutely fantastic, and props to him for slotting it afterwards. That's
Absolutely.
always very hard, especially that rush of blood to the head. A lot of good high flyers in the forward line. You see it with like Liam Ryan, Jamie Elliott himself.
Mm-hmm.
Take those marks and then just miss it. But yep, made a very good highlight that will be enjoyed for many a Anzac Day clash in the future.
And when it comes to just Collingwood in general, normally it's someone like Jeremy Howe that you expect to take those kinds of
Yeah,
marks
yeah,
because that's what he's
exactly.
known for. But it's always good to
Yeah.
see Jamie Elliott get up on the park.
Mm, yeah. Well, in terms of the actual possession and territory battle, in or the game style is what
Hmm.
I'm trying to say. Essendon pretty much dominated the day in terms of that. There were 19-8 centre clearances, and in terms of normal clearances, it was 42-24. And really, it was only great pressure by Collingwood by
Hmm.
tackling and interception that meant the Dons were actually going to struggle to convert that into score.
Yep.
Um, they did obviously get a lot more than Collingwood. They got 6-7 to Collingwood's 1-3, but obviously, um, it's a bit of for that amount of dominance, they could have got a lot more. And it was very interesting. It was a bit different this center. Stringer took his most center bounces for the year, 75% center bounce in attendance, and he took his opportunity as well. 6 inside 50s, 11 score involvements to
Hmm.
go with his 19 possessions.
Not bad.
Unfortunately, one goal's free, but it was a very good performance in his mid forward role, and I think it was a very good move. Magpies obviously dominated Port in the centre, and Jake Stringer was doing very well in stoppages up forward.
Hmm.
So I think that was just a smart move on Brad Scott's account. And the other inside mids, Parrish and Durham, both had prolific games. Parrish, 550 metres gained from his 25 disposals at 80% efficiency. So yeah, I thought that was a very good performance. As I said, nearly one of the best. And on the back half movement, it was Martin McGrath and Heppel sending up a lot of chains, 78 possessions between them,
Hmm.
with McGrath also getting 10 intercepts. And it's how Essendon got a lot of their chains started off.
Hmm.
Um, Collingwood's pressure meant a lot of those chains didn't actually reach the inside 50s, but it was definitely sort of like the playmaking area for Essendon. Langford kicked 4-2 on Howe.
Not
His
bad.
possessions, I thought Howe's was a bit defensively poor during the game. He had a few moments where I think he was dropped off. And Wright scored 2 goals from his 2 inside 50s mark, so he was performing very well on return. But standout defender for Collingwood, Darcy Moore, absolutely fantastic. Um, Moore absolutely feasted. 8 marks, 12 intercepts, 80%, 87% disposal efficiency from 27. And he was pretty great.
Not bad.
Um,
Not bad.
I will say both teams sort of struggled in defense, especially when Ball went to ground. There were a lot of stoppage, goals. Um, and yeah, as I said, um, but yeah, it was just Collingwood who probably were less in the game in terms of, territory.
Mm.
As I said, their forward pressure, when Essendon looked dangerous, they weren't letting the ball go inside 50. They were defending a bit higher up the ground. It was very good. Yeah. And also, I should mention, I completely glossed over, Nick Dacos, fantastic game. And with Pendlebury, they combined with 50 combined possession. Nick had 7 score involvements, 8 inside 50, 6 intercepts and a goal.
Hmm.
Pendle's having 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 2 inside 50s, 2 tackles inside 50s, and 9 contested possessions. Obviously, one of his handball was a 1,000. Oh, sorry, 2,000?
10,000.
10,000. I knew I was up by something. It was a factor of 10, not double. And yeah, as I said, there was just class by Pendles as well.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, if you're a bit younger and you haven't watched as much of Pendlebury, it's a lot of he's got to be the best body movement player. Like, he just finds so much space, not by being fast, but by faking people out, getting them to move
Hmm.
when they shouldn't. And yeah, he was class. He was distributing. In terms of the Collingwood forward line, it was a bit wasteful. Obviously, my check, I said 3 goals free. It was there was a lot of pressure. McCreary, Hill, Schultz, while they were very wasteful, they provide a lot of pressure acts and run.
Hmm.
As I said, a lot of this forward attack from Collingwood, it looked a lot better. It was just not converting. But yeah, their hard running and transition, you know, uh, pretty good. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think it was just the Bombers who had the better performance through the day, but just really couldn't work through the hard running Magpies pressure. Um, and yeah, on the flip side, both teams just had too many errors. Especially the Dons who kept the Magpies in the game, especially in the earlier half when after they got off to that big lead. Well, as I said, Magpies just really need to look to convert a bit better, clean up a bit of their clearance work, which leaves their defense exposed. You know, because obviously it's a lot harder to defend the center transitions than the deeper chain of attacks where Essendon started. But yeah, overall, scrappy but pretty good performance by both teams. I don't think anyone's holding their head down in shame, even though it's a high turnover game. It's just pressure does that. It's almost like a finals atmosphere, really.
Yeah. Marquee games will do
I
that.
think exactly. So for both teams that may end up in the finals at the end, obviously, the draw wasn't doing too well for Collingwood. Favors Essendon a bit because their percentage, at least they'll know generally if they're going to make the final or not. It's almost psychologically because they'll prefer the 4 points, but having destiny in their own hand, depending on how it goes, there may be more draws. But yeah, no, I said overall, I'm very impressed with Essendon so far this year.
Yeah, I agree. They've been having one hell of a performance, and
Yeah,
whether that's due to behind the scenes changes, whether it's due to some of their players being more mature and willing to take the game on a little bit more, whether
yeah.
it's because of the trades that they made in the off season, like by getting Ben Mackay and Xavier Dersma, for
Yeah,
examples.
honestly,
But
yeah, I think it's a bit of that, but and I think as the media tends to do, they will probably go back on those tracks because they're all great. But I think more than anything, I feel like every Essendon player is actually playing more of a defined role this season.
mhm.
Um, and I think that's helped a lot with their structure because as I said, like how many games have we gone? Oh, Zach Merritt dominated, but there were so many pressures acts by Caldwell, and and Ben Hobbs had some classy forward movement, or and as I said, Keppel and Martin providing at the back, Andrew McGrath racking up pills and doing all the uncontested play. As I said, it's you can attribute quite obvious style of Essendon's play to, almost everyone on their list. Even, they've got a few performers that aren't going as great this year, but overall, it's pretty cohesive, a lot more cohesive than Essendon have been in the past.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, it's good that there's some positive signs of life over at the hangar. Like, you can't really complain too
Mm.
much about what you've seen so far. If you're an Essendon supporter, you just hope that that stays consistent enough to play finals.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I said, and Collingwood, as I said, I don't know what you think about this, sort of loss, because obviously if you put it in the perspective of, Collingwood were winning the grand final last year and they really need to get going because of their, they want to obviously defend that in the finals. So obviously it wasn't great getting a draw. There was a lot of inefficiencies, but I think, when you get a team out of form, you've got to still reinforce some of the good things that were happening. And yeah, as I said, I don't think structurally they were that far off the pace. Maybe early, maybe even a bit harshly. You could say defensively there were a few, you know, uh, things a bit deeper where they lost a few. But yeah, as I said,
I don't
um,
think it's massive warning signs for Collingwood. I'll be honest, because you look at
yeah, it was the earlier games that were saying, oh, this might be a bit. But as I said, there's more cohesion from that.
yeah, like you look at I think you Richmond of 2019 to 2020, like the
Mm,
whole. Granted, that's when we all went into the hubs and the game was put off for like
yeah,
a while, so every team was kind of out of sorts. But like
exactly.
we didn't look all that great going into the start, like into the early rounds of that season, despite everything. Like after everything changed.
Yeah.
And we still managed to come back and defend our premiership title. So it's still completely possible for Collingwood.
Yeah, and I said this loss, as I said at the start, I would actually say, again, there was a few, especially with forward line function, that were just not, like I said, this was wasteful, but before they weren't even showing a sign. Whereas this sort of seems like, when you see those Hawthorn coming off premierships, they go in the regular season, they'll just have these what seem like lackluster games, but they'll always be like slowly tinkering.
Mm.
And then when it comes finals, it will just come together a bit more. And I don't know, Collingwood, obviously they'll need to, we'll find out by the end of the next buys whether they're actually at that stage, looking a bit better, looking to come back into the eight by the end of the year. But yeah, I'm not too turned off by this Collingwood performance. I think it was just a spirited draw by Essendon, competing against solid defensively and just a bit misattuned Collingwood, I would say.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Shall we move on to the second Anzac Day clash over in our capital state of Canberra, the ACT, between GWS and Brisbane? It was not honestly. It wasn't really all that great game to watch.
Yeah,
because GWS again, they're favourites for a reason. They look really, really good. They've got players coming back from injury. That helps solidify that case. I will talk about one of them in a moment. And Brisbane just don't look themselves. They struggle to win at home. They're struggling to win away. It's like, did they even play in a grand final last year? It's literally
oh man,
it's literally like the same case as Collingwood. Like they're both played in a grand final. It was a very close grand final in 2023, and now both teams just don't look as like as they did during that campaign.
Yeah, I would actually argue the optics look far worse for Brisbane.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't want to get started on it too early because we'll go on a bit after you get through the player analysis and all that. But I just want to say, in terms of, clearances and midfield effort, something that Brisbane purely could beat teams off. They didn't need to have this rock solid defense. They'll just never let you touch the ball.
Yeah, because they had a really, really strong midfield core. But now it's just
exactly. And now you're going to obviously talk about what GWS did to them. They were Brisbaneing Brisbane, and it's like, well, you've got the Sydney who are like sort of doing that game style, but have a more complete list. A few other teams, like we'll talk about Sydney a bit later. That are again a bit like that. So they'll take a bit more away from you, but they're also very dominant in the middle. And then it's just like, well, even if Brisbane did find a way back, are they going to be as good as some of these lists? And I'm not too sure myself.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'll start on talking about the players. Canberra local Tom Green, I think, was best on ground. He completely tore the lines apart in the midfield, finishing with 37 touches, 73% efficiency, 17 contested possessions, 7 clearances, 9 score involvements, 1-1 scoreline, 5 tackles, and 23 pressure acts. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention the complete scoreline. So it was 17-11, 113 to 8-11, 59. And yeah, Tom Green was just untouchable in the midfield. He was so lively and incredible to watch. Kieran Briggs, back from injury, because he taken out during gather round, same round that Sam Taylor went down. Gather round, I think it was.
Yeah.
So he came back, and his performance alone kind of showed why he's such an important ruck for them. He finished with 16 touches, 15 of them contested, 8 inside 50s, 34 hitouts, 8 clearances, and 4 score involvements.
And obviously he was up against Darcy Fort, but Darcy didn't have the worst game. I mean, as I said, I'm only looking from stats and all that, but so I would say it's a very good comeback from him.
I think Kieran Briggs did have the upper hand, but I don't think it was a bad game from Darcy Fort.
Yeah.
Harry Himmelberg also stood out. 27 touches at 85.2% efficiency, 14 marks, 4 inside 50s, and 6 score involvements. I believe there were I think someone kicked 4 goals, or something like that. I can't remember the goal
3
distribution.
goals for Riccardi
Yes, that one.
and Callum Brown too.
So good performances from their from their not star forwards, but like the forwards and midfielders that can put on a performance.
Yeah.
So
I mean, obviously, Brown, he's probably had a pretty up there year for a second forward. Like,
no, I
you'd
agree.
put him as any, like, you'd have him MS over a lot of second forwards this season. Like, I mean, even for my team, I'd probably like Callum Brown at the moment over Marshall or, I won't say Georgie because he's just come back from injury, but.
But you look at my team where we don't even have a forward line. I would very much like
Yeah,
Callum Brown.
exactly. Forward one's a bit, yeah. I didn't want to mention that, but I'm glad you did.
No, it's very
Yeah,
valid.
so I said, it's a pretty good performance by him. A player that showed bits last year, but I wasn't expecting him to be a guy for the Sydney this year.
Talking about decent players for Brisbane that put up a pretty solid performance. Noah Answorth, I thought had another good game. The young star, who's he's looking pretty good off of halfback. Like give him some things to do like last week, and he'll put on a pretty good show. So he finished with 13 touches, but at 100% efficiency. That's why I noted that's one specific, despite the low touches. He was very, very proficient with the ball. 4 marks, 3 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 15 pressure acts. In terms of Brisbane's midfield core, I think only one player actually kind of stood up, and that was Josh Dunkley. He finished with 20 touches at 85% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 30 pressure acts. He was very much, despite GWS clearly just demolishing them, he was very much an on-baller. He was very much in every contest he could be in. I'm pretty sure he was also in a smaller tagging role, as well as being an on-baller. So, but it's like you look at Lachie Neale, Cam Rayner. You expect they're arguably the Brisbane's 2 strongest midfielders, right? When they're not on, you're 50-50. Predominantly Lachie Neale, but you expect them to have a big sort of impact on the contests, but they were way too quiet this week.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, Lachie Neale did lead the clearances for Brisbane. Obviously, didn't really have much impact. A lot of handballs, not many meters gained. And then your next best, Darcy fought Joe Danaher before you get to Dunkley's 4. So, as I said, it's just not what you're used to seeing, And I must admit, I did say Josh Dunkley as in, it depends if you class him.
He just had a better all-rounded
If you put him
performance.
bang in the middle, yeah, exactly. Like Josh Dunkley, if you bang him in the middle, I'll say like him and Neil are probably the most talented rovers, or but yeah, as I said, Cam Rayner is a very good, is a bit of pace, hard to defend. He'll get that fast breaking clearance, but as you said, he did other things obviously, but in terms of actual midfield performance, it was very quiet.
There wasn't really all that much more to talk about with this game. It's just another solid performance from GWS. Again, they've only lost, I think, 1 game so far this season, and they've looked very, 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 very complete, even with their big injuries out. Sam Taylor, of course, being a very big notable one. Jesse Hogan didn't play this week. He was out with a verdict from the MRO.
With the verdict, I like it.
So it's like, it's good to see that, despite having these big players missing, they're still consistent, they're still strong, they're still good, and they're still very much top 2 contention.
And it's stuff that sort of came, as I said, when they were struggling, even the year before, as I said, there were these players and you could see it, but, you couldn't really just see that gelling together. And, as I said, the amount of the turnaround from, Kingsley, even just in terms of confidence, he's quickly told this list, you've got the talent to perform, and it goes all the way through.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
considering that team was struggling at the start of last year and just haven't took a backward step since. So,
Who knows?
yeah, very well done.
This year could finally be the year, but
It could be.
they still have to contend with Geelong, who are still currently
Yeah, well, I said I'm
without a
going to talk
loss.
about that later. Yeah, and I must admit, like for me, I think those two are the biggest contenders. I like a lot about Carlton have done this year.
Yeah, same.
Melbourne obviously have a lot of plus side, but I think there's maybe even getting a bit of separation between Western Sydney, Geelong, and the rest. And I think even personally, I think Geelong's actually the better of the two. There's not that much
At this point in
between
time,
them.
I think that would also be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And yeah, as I said, I've got a lot of good things to say about Geelong. So if you're a fan, tune in for that uh, analysis in, well, I think it'd be the next game after.
Yes. So, just to wrap up GWS and Brisbane, there was only one injury. It was to Callum Archie. Another
Oh,
hamstring,
yeah.
which is very unlucky. I don't know the severity of it. I didn't manage to find that out. Hopefully, it's only a small hamstring issue. Hopefully, it'll only be a
Mm.
couple weeks. But yeah,
And it's a bit of pace loss for Brisbane as well. It's a bit of a shame.
yeah, it's very unlucky. All right, where are we going next?
Oh, actually, I lied. I've probably put this game out of my memory. We're going to my club, Port Adelaide versus St Kilda. It was a game.
It was a game. That's right.
Very. Look, I purged it from my memory because, when these two teams get together, they can put on an absolute clanger classic. And this one did not disappoint. There were so many turnovers. Amazingly, a lot of drop marks. And don't forget those inconsistent umpires and even a bit of weird commentary with BT trying to claim that one-on-one defensive contests weren't a thing, which was just, I don't know. It was a lot. It was a lot for not much in the game. The final scoreline was 11-16, 82 to 11-6, 72. St Kilda really wanted to be put away early. They produced 5 forward half intercepts, 3 inside the 50, and they were like, Port, can you please get to an early lead? Port were very happy to slot it through for behinds. They were like, yeah, we'll get it, but we won't really punish you for it. And in the end of the first quarter, the Saints would actually lead by 7. Port, I will say, would get better as the game went on.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, injuries to Aaliyah in the second quarter, Sam Pepper and Rosie in the third quarter would actually leave them very tired and very vulnerable late trying to defend a 21-point lead early in the last quarter. But honestly, the Saints were very lackluster moving the ball. Came back a bit, but honestly, they did not go hard enough in that fourth quarter. When they did have that chance, when they did have a bit of, chance to build momentum. And honestly, Port, amazingly, they were tired, they were gassed, but they actually had some very solid defensive efforts, probably more so than the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And they would hold on to what would be a brave but scrappy and necessary victory over, a bit of a toothless Saints offense, I'll say. Did I say the score? It was
Yes,
11
you did.
16 82, 11 6 72. Right. So yeah, as I mentioned, Port gained the dominance all night. Yeah, lackluster converting from Port Adelaide too. Yeah, it was very. It sort of held them back from dismantling. As I said, it was a bit weird. Early on, they missed a few easy shots.
Mm-hmm.
Then they actually went pretty well. But a lot of their contributors were very up and down. Rosie, Butters, Boak, Marshall, and Georgiadis all bobbed in and out of the contest. Obviously, Rosie picked up that injury. But they sort of went from solidly involved to wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
But in their absence, there was a lot of actual, performers that you don't always see from Port. A couple you do. Willem Drew, Ollie Wines were fantastic. Jordan Sweet, I thought had a very good game, and sort of put Marshall to a bit of shame. Really, it was very solid around the ground, very good in the touch. Let Port get a lot of first possessions.
Mm-hmm.
St Kilda's clearances were pretty awful for the night. And then you got Lockie Jones, who I sort of bagged a bit last week, and turned around. He was a lot more solid defensively this week, and was very good with ball in hand on the halfback line. Asava Radagalia, again, had a pretty good night. Willie Rioli lifted a bit. Big Charlie Dixon took. Honestly, if we didn't have Dixon, it was hard to see us winning that match because he just took Max and mark packs that we just weren't getting. All our other tolls, they led wide, converted a bit, but it was just it wasn't the deepest attacks ever.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason Burgoyne, probably one of the players of the night. Willem Drew would actually win the medal presented. He had a very good contest, but not far behind him was Jace Burgoyne, who was fantastic on the wing. He was very clean, and as I said, I thought his performance, stamped his authority in trying to get that wing position. And as I said, the wastefulness in terms of scoring is very weird. Like, Port scored a lot of unlikely wide goals, and they only technically left 10 points on the board in terms of X scores, comparing it to what they normally would. Whereas Saints actually kicked 20 above what was expected. So, while it was close, as I said, in terms of attacking structure, there wasn't actually that much by the Saints.
Yeah.
It was still a bit of a worry for them. And, as I said, it's a bit of a worry all season because, in summary, and, that's why they're 2 and 5 at the moment?
I think
Is that
that's
what we're up to? Yeah, and it's like they're very patchy in the clearances and they can't defend off clearance. They're actually, I saw the stat, they're actually the worst in the comp heading into this round, and I don't think that would have changed. Round 7 we're at. And they got a pretty anemic forward line. Max King obviously in and out with injury and suspension and all that sort of thing. But all in all, around the ground, only 1 or 2 Saints players I'll say was like showing real heart, but being let down by poor performances behind them. I would say both defensively, Wilkie and Cordy went back to have solid performances after disappointing last week where they got pretty much beaten by the Bulldogs, I think it was.
Yes, that's correct.
They
got cleaned up by the doggies.
Wilkie, 13 disposals, all effective, 9 marks, 9 spoils, 7 intercepts, and 9 1%ers. Unfortunately, around him, he just couldn't get any halfbackers to distribute the ball. Wangani Malira had a wasteful game. Jack Sinclair, Diggle Howard, Josh Battle, and Riley Bonner would all produce 27 turnovers and 29 clangers, giving Port 12 turnovers past their centre circle with 6, to 6, which St Kilda were able to generate, and it was 5-1 inside the 50-metre arc. So, St Kilda just let Port get the ball back in their half of the ground. They weren't able to move it out of defence. And, as I said, it's a weird one where 27 turnovers to 29 clangers. So there actually were a few, drop marks, uncontested, for both teams. But, specifically St Kilda, it just really wasn't there. And I did say Marshall was beaten throughout the night. I did actually forget this. I've written it later. He did have an early injury niggle, and he attended 88% of the bounces for 31 hitouts. So I've actually given him a pass. So ignore what I said a bit earlier. There's a lot of games to cover. And the other one that I want to say, Bradley Hill on the outside, while it wasn't a stat-filled night, was terrific at run and solid disposals when the Saints just looked so stagnant. As I said, it was just he was the player that wanted to lift them, but they just didn't have much around them. Their forward line was...
He's one of the few players that will always have a fairly consistent, solid performance.
Yeah, especially for that wing position, like it's not always about possession, it's about your ability to run and take on the game.
Mm.
And, it actually suits what the Saints want to do this year. It's just not come together in any sort of game plan, which is a bit concerning.
And
We'll
it's
talk
like
about that in a bit. Yeah.
there's been a talk in the media about whether it's because Ross Lyon has been um, a lot more
Attacking.
subdued in terms of how he coaches this, and whereas in terms of, well, I wouldn't say subdued, but like he's been a lot more, I don't know, kinda more. He hasn't really been the one to give them a spray and be like in their
I,
face sort of thing. At least not anymore, because that's how he used to coach.
yeah. I
And
mean, I get that, but at this point, because I think I'd say like late 2010s, 2018 onwards to,
mhm.
now basically, it was the knock on St Kilda for the longest time that the inside midfield was always got beaten. It was very uncontested. It just got Armstronged a lot of the time.
Mm.
And a few players have emerged from that. Jack Steele, obviously, that acquisition has been really great, and they've obviously plugged and put in a lot of different players. But it's weird, like a lot of the focus for them then shifted on trying to fix that forward line. But I might argue that midfield never actually found its footing. You know what I mean? Like it's
Actually,
been there, but
I agree
even
with you.
last year, it was a lot of defense that got them into the finals, and maybe we're just assuming a bit much, and maybe like St Kilda need to strip back a bit to go forward. Maybe this is just the year that they need to look at to retool, because it's going to be very hard for them to win again, where they still have that problem with the forward line.
Yeah.
Um, and as I said, we just might need to readjust because last year's defensive effort might just not be sustainable. Um,
No, especially when other
so.
teams have redeveloped themselves and gotten better around them, while St Kilda's kind of stayed
Exactly.
the same, or in
Stagnant,
some cases
exactly.
gone below their own expectations.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, and we've talked about teams like, Essendon before, where they have clear problems. Like I've said a million times on the podcast, Essendon still don't have a good defense.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But they've attuned around their game. And, as I said, they've brought in players that make sense for this year and made them play in a game style. Where I don't see that as from St Kilda. Like, they were great defensively last year, and I'm not going to say I know what Ross Lyon was exactly doing, but it seems to me like they were like, we've got this solid defense, we're generating a lot of turnovers. Let's get this quick ball movement from the back half to the forward half. Try and get that fast movement pace to break open, get a few more leads. Bring the ball to ground maybe for our smalls, but
Mm-hmm.
try and attack opponents this way. But it's just not happening consistently enough. And, so the flip side to that is, well, that's good for general play, but if you're conceding so much from the stoppages, it's like, it's almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like you're trading a bit of crap defense for what they're good at, but you're not actually being a good defensive side. You're just defending in a different way, and it's still not converting to offense. So, yeah, it's a bit. I don't want to be too hard on St Kilda because I think we've blasted them the last couple of weeks,
I
but
mean,
they're
they
definitely
haven't
a
really
bit.
looked very good the last couple of weeks. It's kind of unfair.
No, no. Yeah, as I said, it's just yeah. They honestly at this point you just want to see a bit more work rate around the ground from St Kilda.
Mm.
Especially in that midfield. It can't just be left to Jack Steele. Um, you know, to have mammoth games here and there. They've got to find a bit. You know, through other players as well. I'm just gonna quickly check. Is that about a tenth? Like, because it's like Windhager, Hugo Garcia, Seb Ross. They're the ones supporting him
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, and can you say either you would pick on any other? You would probably go Windhager because he's a developing young kid, but you know, just
Yeah, Sebros
yeah,
is
it's
getting
very
on in
suboptimal.
years. Garcia is still too
Garcia's just a
young.
bit too raw. Yeah, exactly. Sinclair goes in here sometimes, but even he hasn't really been that clean. He's not a clearance winner. If you do win the clearance, you give the ball off to Sinclair, so he'll boot it forward. So it's just not. They don't really have the tools, and it's very rare to say, a team doesn't have the tools to produce good midfield constant. It was West Coast last year when they didn't have enough players. A lot of their older veterans, weren't in, took a while. But yeah, I'll take West Coast midfield over St Kilda's at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree with
It's
that.
just that bad. Yeah.
Especially
Anyway,
and I will touch on this soon because we'll talk about the coast to coast game. But
yeah.
there's even with the star player Harley Reid not playing this week, they still looked really good and really competitive.
Yeah, for the first half, and a lot of that drift off. It was a bit more, defensively and clearances as well. But I think there was a lot to. I think actually, we'll talk about it later. But yeah, as I said, it's just a lot different to this game. As I said, it just is just so stagnant. And yeah, as I said, it was a pretty miserly for the St Kilda's forwards, but I actually think that they did as much as they could to get St Kilda in it. As I said, it's just they don't have that much players there. And, just to sum up, talk a bit more about Port Adelaide, because obviously it won't go down as an impressive win. They've still got some problems with converting, and, I think people are getting off Port Adelaide as a deep premiership threat this year, which I think is fair enough. I'm a bit on the fence personally, but I do think this win was okay. But they will be tested. Sam Pepper confirmed to have done his ACL. So he's out for the year. Yeah, Aaliyah did actually enter the concussion protocol,
Yeah, he
so we'll
was
be missing
concussed.
him for probably the next couple. And Rosie, it's a bit of a 50-50. But yeah, as I said, it's a bit up in the air. I wouldn't be surprised if he got rested. It's a pretty short turnaround. Oh no, it isn't. It's a week, isn't it? But yeah, it's we'll see. And Higgins, he had actually a pretty good game. Unfortunately, he's going to the tribunal. I think
they're challenging the 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I'll actually go off a small little tangent.
No, go for it.
Those tackles, I think, should always go to the tribunal. When you're talking about technique in tackling, I think the AFL's, and I know it's always a bit of a debate how outcome focused the AFL should be when they're adjudicating this. But, these tackles, and we've seen it before, there's been a lot of dangerous tackles that have just not resulted in anything, maybe getting a week at best, whereas this tackle, where, as you can see it, Higgins, sure, it was a bit weird. He did actually have the motion. He had everything in position to sling Aaliyah down, but he actually had no force.
No.
There was no downward motion from him. It arguably wasn't even really a tackle. He just went down with Aaliyah. I don't want to blame Aaliyah because, he was just doing what he did.
If you look
tried
at the
to kick
footage,
the ball.
Yeah, he tried to kick the ball, and that's kind of what put him into the position
exactly
that messed him up.
And I think we also had what was it last week? Where I think it was Fifey where he got tackled, but the ball actually hit his face. As I said,
yes.
So we're getting tackles that majority have just been luck. That's what determined. They haven't been the worst tackles. And you know what? I would actually say, maybe you could consider Higgins. Maybe it's fair enough he gets a week because, he did do the action. I think that would be a bit rough, personally. Honestly, I could see him getting off fully, but I really hope the tribunal takes this down to at least a week minimum, because 3's it's just ridiculous for a player that probably did actually mentally make the decision not to put downward force.
Yeah.
He did what the AFL wanted, and is looking for a 3-week suspension. Whereas I said, as other people say, like you can deliberately punch someone in the jaw and just be let off. As I said, it's just making a lot of farce in the old tribunal. It doesn't take that long. It's always about this time of the season where we realize the tribunal's like much more of a farce than we
Yeah,
realized.
that sounds
We're
about right.
optimistic at the start of the year. We were like, oh, bumps leaving ground, they're cracked down, they're pretty consistent. Now it's just
Now it's all over the place yet
falling
again.
apart. Yeah, exactly. So,
Well, I mean,
yes, I'll just finish off with that.
yeah, I do
Yeah.
agree that 3 weeks I think is too much. I'd be okay with it getting downgraded to 2 to make him miss the same amount of games that Aaliyah is missing, just to a bit of fairness on that.
I don't believe in that, but yeah, I can see it.
But yeah, I mean, if it ends up getting dropped down to 1 week, I see no issues with that either. If the tribunal kind of just throw it out and keep the 3 weeks, then there's probably an issue there. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, it's a tribunal. All three. What 4 options actually are on the table?
Yeah,
3, 2, 1, and nothing.
4 options. Yeah.
So,
shall we move on to probably the biggest game of the? Oh, I'd say the biggest game of the round. Like one of the biggest games.
I'll say it's the best game of the round in terms of quality.
Geelong and Carlton. This was a very, very, despite Geelong actually having the lead all evening and like never really looking like they were going to lose the lead. It was a very intense back and forth.
Yeah.
And like the scoreline kind of does prove that. It was 18-10, 118 to 15-15, 105.
Yeah. And, as I said, it was so weird. Like, Carlton dominated contest. There's a lot of strong performers in the middle. Even the forward line, defensively, it wasn't actually Geelong's best game. But it's just whenever Geelong went inside 50, bam, they scored. And, it's just like, it was so varied. And I've got it written here. You had all types of goals from Geelong. It was crumbing, stoppage, intercept, direct, wide. And it was just like an offensive smorgasbord, really. And, you combine that with Carlton's, pretty solid goal scoring. Both their tolls did well. We'll go through that in a bit. But it was just, I'm not sure if you'll get a better offensively structured game this year. No, I'm gonna be bold and put that.
I agree because you look at how both of these teams are structured, especially in terms of their forward line, and they're very, very similar.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'll probably have a bit to bang on again about why I like Geelong's forward line, but it's not like Carlton were lacking types of entry or not attacking in any specific thing. It was just like I said, I will say, like, defensively you could fine tune a bit of this game, but like, geez, both teams were jumping for the throat. It was hard to.
Yeah,
it was just a tough night. Often we're like, tough night to be a forward, tough night to be a defender today, Saturday. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I'm going to talk about Cam Guthrie. First game of the season, come back from a long-term injury, and he looked incredibly fit. He looked very composed whenever he had the ball. He was their probably their biggest player that they were kind of missing. Granted, Geelong, didn't really look like they were merely missing anyone, considering they haven't lost a game yet. But in terms of just how they've been structured over the years, he's always been one of their key consistent players.
And I think, what you're saying is, like, sure, they weren't missing it, like...
they weren't missing him in terms of performance, but in terms of consistency.
But they were covering for him, and they were welcoming back with open arms.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he finished with 27 touches, 3 inside 50s, and 3 score involvements. Had a really, really strong game. I think he only played 70-ish%. Which...
Yeah.
Not too bad. I mean, again, he's returning from a long-term injury. Like, you kind of don't want to push him too hard.
Exactly, yeah.
Zach Tui, as always, stands up really, really well. Again, in big games, he got 3 goals off
Mm.
of 17 touches at 82.4%
Um,
efficiency, 3 score involvements, and 3 tackles of his own.
yep.
For Carlton, I thought Jack Burrows had a really, really underrated game. Uh,
Geelong still.
oh, yeah, no, he is Geelong. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
colors
know what you mean.
confused in my
Yeah.
head. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
had a really, really strong pressure roll. He finished with 14 touches at 78.6% efficiency. He 8 contested possessions, 2 clearances, a 1-1 score line, 4 score involvements, 10 tackles, and 24 pressure acts.
Hmm.
Um, Now on to Carlton. I thought Jacob Wiedering had
Yeah.
another strong game in the back line. 19
Oh,
touches,
for sure.
7 contested, 11 intercepts, 12 marks, 5 score involvements, and 100% time on ground. They
Yeah.
didn't let him
They needed
off.
him though.
They needed him there.
Um, as I said, like while I was saying like, and I think Voss pointed out at the end of the game, like he wasn't happy with the defensive efforts. And I think for a team, really pushing to make sure that they're taken seriously, it was actually good to see.
Mm.
But I thought Young and Kemp sort of weren't quite as uh you know, stable. When pressed with a very relentless attack by at Geelong.
Yeah.
So, as I said, Wettering just sort of held it all together. And, as I said, we mentioned last week, you play him if he's fit because, he wears people like a glove.
And
And,
he's also
um,
Carlton's
you know,
best defender. Like, there's kind of no denying that at this
oh,
point
yeah,
in
he
time.
shut down Tomahawk. Like, there was no. Like, Tomahawk even, like, he tried his hardest. He put a few pressure acts, he still contributed a bit.
Mm.
But in terms of, like, direct offense, it was nothing. Um, so, yeah, it was a very big props to him.
I'm going to mention Matt Kennedy because I thought he also had an underrated
Oh
game.
yeah. No,
Um,
put it in as well, yeah.
he finished with 21 touches at 81% efficiency, 7 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 8 score involvements, 9 tackles, and 26 pressure acts. I thought he was really, really strong in the
Yeah.
midfield, very consistent. Like we've talked about in the past, how strong Carlton's midfield actually looks. But
Yeah.
it's good to see when, like, in some aspects, some of them might have kind of lower performances than they normally have, that others step up. And Matt Kennedy was one of them this week.
Yeah, and I think like as I said, because obviously I think the standout when, had to be Patrick Cripps.
Yeah, as always.
But in terms of providing a bit of offense too, because it's not like Walsh was exactly out of the contest. It's just the Carlton's midfields are just racking up ridiculous stats at the moment. As I said, they dominated the night in terms of clearances.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think you touched on him. Pettinet was absolutely fantastic coming back. So, but yeah, as I said, it's just Kennedy around the ground. You would be forgiven if if he just took like that side sort of role, but he's still performing a very good thing, very good effort for a very strong midfield at the moment. And yeah, as I said, it was very good attacking play as well, which Carlton sort of needed because as a note, neither team could really make a misstep firing on offense the way this game was going.
An interesting stat that I found earlier today actually was that Carlton, out of all of the games and all the quarters that they've played so far, they've only technically won half of them. They're a very hot and cold team in the middle of games, and it's something that they definitely need to work on going into the latter half.
I can see it, but it's very. I think it's just the way Carlton play. It's very. Like, obviously, they haven't really dominated teams this year. So, when you say that, as I said, they have let teams in it. I think it's just. And I think, again, what I mentioned before, like defensively, I think they've actually got a few minor problems there. Like, they are relying a lot on Wettering, but they've also had a lot of, a few in and out players and all that. So I think it's just something that they've got to tune into going into finals. But,
Yeah.
as I say, it's probably what I guess the media, as I said, you can imagine I'm starting to talk about it now because this is when, people say, oh, who are the teams that are contending? Carlton sort of lay in a bit of limbo. Percentage-wise, you wouldn't believe they're a top 4 team. Performance-wise, you think that they could hang out there with the best of them, and I think they have. But, as I said, it's just bits and pieces for Carlton. I wouldn't be too worried, but at the same time, as I said, it would be nice if they shut down a team. I think that's what they're looking for, so far in the season.
Yeah, I pretty much completely agree there. On the injury front, Patrick Dangerfield went out with a hamstring injury. I don't know if it
He
was
was
only.
so good before he went out.
I don't think it was.
Yeah, he's missing a while.
Yeah, it was a pretty hard injury as far as I'm aware.
Mm.
Hopefully it doesn't affect Geelong's game too much, but also, for the other teams, you want to hope that at some point they do lose a game.
Yeah, no, I mean, they will. I mean, it's always. I feel like most of the first games are just like a random one.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's just you always think it's going to be like this big clash, but then they'll suddenly like lose to. Oh, I don't know. Let's put the Gold Coast up there. Let's say they'll have the random win against Geelong.
It sounds like a Gold Coast thing to do, I'll be honest.
Exactly. So, yeah.
And then,
I mean, hell, even the Western Bulldogs, like they were very close to taking it off Geelong.
Yeah, that's true.
As I said, it's just, and I guess that's the flip side, and we'll talk about it a bit because, so in this game, still haven't brought up yet, they're able to convert 40% of their inside 50s, they're able to convert 40% of their 45 inside 50s into goals.
That's pretty consistent.
It's pretty insane.
That is crazy.
It's ridiculous. And as I said, we said Stengel, Myers, Cameron. I think Myers was actually probably one of the best on ground. Had
right.
so many scoring involvements. And also Ollie Henry, I've just written because I summarised Geelong's attack, found a lot of space in forward 50. But as I said, it's just their ability to find, again, and I want to try and find this stat, like, when you get that kick inside 50 and it's on the outer, like the ability to find that deeper entry, that shorter option, you're outside 50, you're not always going to take it.
So like an inside 50 into the pocket sort of statistic.
Exactly, you know what I mean? And it's like, how often they're finding that second target, because so many, and it's not always by foot, it's sometimes by hand.
Yeah.
When you got Myers getting the dish off to snap around, Cameron can just kick him off his own boot. Dangle was dishing him off. It's just, it just makes it almost seem undefendable. And I know, as I said, there were moments where Carlton just didn't quite defend as well as I'd like to. But geez, it's just hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard to see where they will start. Because you can imagine, like, I guess in the finals, maybe you could argue that teams might try and limit that more. Because it's less of a problem in the regular season. You're probably a bit more concerned about your own style of play more than, exactly, especially this earlier on, exactly, counter teaming your opponent. But, if it just keeps on going, it's very hard to see Geelong not being able to score enough each game to win games of football.
Yeah.
Score involvements, just insane.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I should also say, for Carlton, I give the nod to Kerno and Mackay, who kicked 3 goals too and 2 goals too, respectively. They performed, they needed to. They stood up when it mattered. Very good.
Yeah, it's always good when they're consistent. You can't really fault them too much as long as they're presenting and scoring off of that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's one more note on the injury front, and it was a late change for Carlton with Orazio Fantasia going out with an illness. Probably, probably just a cold or stomach bug. Something that kind of small.
You never know with him.
Yeah, but is what it is. So that will summarize Geelong and Carlton. We want to do Freo and the Doggies?
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to make a quick, before we jump onto this one, I do want to make a quick note on North Melbourne and Adelaide, because I thought...
Yeah, sure, we can touch that.
I didn't actually write notes on this because it was a big blowout of a game. Crows won by almost 60 points. But I thought...
I think I watched the first
The fact that
Yeah.
North Melbourne managed to nearly get to 100 points, I thought was very, very impressive. Cameron Zohar stepped up in
Yeah.
the forward line. Good for him. Isaac Rankin did really, really well this week. He collected 4 goals on himself. Um, overall, again, I only want to touch on this briefly because there are bigger games to
Yeah.
talk about. But like, I think this was a game that Adelaide desperately needed to win because they were
Yeah, for
100%
sure.
at fault of possibly losing it to North.
I think they were that close to losing it to
Uh,
North. I think North are a different breed
no, no. Well,
this
considering
year.
North don't have a backline, like we're
Yeah.
still very, very concerned for
They
that.
needed
But
to, but
Adelaide desperately needed to show up this week, otherwise it would have been more questions than answers.
yeah, and it's just honestly, I think I'm actually got the bit of the opposite take. I think North were a bit lucky. I think with a lot of their scoring and all that, like they converted. Like you don't want it. It's weird, like telling a team off for converting fairly well, but you know, a lot of their general play, a lot of their entries, like they weren't great, and and you know they were pretty. Adelaide's defense was doing quite well. The bit I was watching, I think it's just, you know, I said it's just the same issues for North, and it's just not quite. There's nothing new, that new being positive about. You know, there's always young players going up and down, like Wardlaw, Luke Davies, Uniacke had a
Yeah,
bit of a better game. Colby McKercher, absolutely fantastic on the halfback line. Um, and you know all these small things, but you know, as I said, there's not much inside contest winning for you know what should be the staple of their. You know, as I said, it's gone down. They're losing the clearances now. Like that's what we used to say was the best thing on the earlier
yeah, because
up
they
games.
had really great midfielders that can win those
Yeah,
clearances, but maybe you're right.
exactly, and they're just
Maybe there is
not
something that has
now.
changed in their midfield.
Yeah, well, I just think they might have lost a tiny bit of spirit, and you just hope that there's a contest that is close enough for them to, you know, present. You would have thought that was Hawthorn, obviously wasn't.
Yeah, unlucky.
Um, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, they just need yeah, it just needs a reset. Otherwise, yeah, as I said, look, I will say, I did have a quick look at you know, because they've obviously have this string of games over 100 points every game this season.
Mm-hmm.
They might be safe. They're playing St Kilda next week, so fingers
Or
crossed. At the very least, keep them under. You gotta, otherwise it's looking a bit
considering St Kilda's
dire.
performances, that is entirely possible,
It
and we'll
is,
talk about that
and
later.
honestly, it's like of all the games that North might be able to win, like this coming up could be it. But you know, as I said, and you know, quickly touching on Adelaide because I watched a bit of it. Obviously you said the most, but I want to shout out to Braden Cook.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you know, sort of a supporting role in the forward line. You know, especially with you know them sort of not too settled on Burgess or you know. Um, and Phil Thorpe still needing a few weeks to come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was very good up forward and supported, surprisingly, a player that hasn't been around. Elliot Himmelberg kicked a couple of goals as well. So, you know, it might, for Adelaide, you know, this game, while it was just a clear dominance, you know, it might have unearthed a couple of options, you know, to keep that forward line fresh against more solid defenses.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. I mean, again, it's good to see Adelaide actually giving a good, like a really, really solid performance.
Yeah.
Especially if, as long as they're finally starting to build on the fact that they don't have Thilthorpe. Tex isn't always going to be able to present. They need other options. Cook being a
Yeah,
very good one.
exactly.
Rankin finally showing up. It's always good
Oh
to
yeah, no, he's been
to
pretty.
see
As I
the
said, he's
magnets
pretty
being
much.
flipped and the
Yeah,
giving better performances.
exactly. And as I said, you know, there's still got a couple. You know, obviously, I don't want to say it every week. Rochelle and Fogarty, you know, still a bit down there. But you know, as I said, at least, at least it gives them the option of hey, they could get you know dropped for a week, find form in the VFL, a VFL.
The
Well,
Sandford.
might be a bit hard, Sandford. and then come back up and hopefully find a bit of confidence, because I'd like to see them get back in it.
Mm.
I mean, obviously, Rochelle was absolutely beautiful last year, hasn't found his footing. Give him time as a youngster. And obviously, Fogarty. I don't need to say much more about him. It's just, I do want to see him because, yeah, as I said, he's a beautiful kick. Yeah, maybe not for the showdown. Drop him for the showdown. I've had too many bad memories of Fogarty kicking well against us.
That's very fair.
So, yeah. Props to Adelaide. Dismantled North.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, now we can move on to Freo and the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, and honestly, this was a pretty good game. The scoreline was a bit deceptive. It was a very free-flowing game where both teams were able to execute what they wanted to do at various parts of the time, parts of the game. But yeah, Freo just, at the end of the day, they converted a bit more. Thanks to the efforts of makeshift first forward option, Josh Tracy, getting better as the year goes on. And yeah, they had a much more consistent effort from their small forwards this week, with Banfield being the star, or the star of them, making up for his inaccuracies last week.
Mm-hmm.
Walters getting a bit more involved, and the pace of Fast Freddy making his return caused the Bulldogs defense trouble all night. They lost the game 14-11-95 to 10-11-71. It was a very weird start of the game, threw both teams in a bit of a loop, because despite WA having, I'm guessing, a historically dry April, the turf at Optus looked saturated and slippery, and Freo sort of got I think a bit of a lucky start. Bit of loose space being caused by a few missed tackles and players falling over. Unfortunately, the other bit of the weirdness in the start of the match was both teams losing players early.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Draper, great young defender. Freo just keep finding people in that halfback position, but unfortunately lost him from a hamstring. Cody Waitman's the other one, done his shoulder, looking to miss a bit of time through because he needs surgery because it's his second major shoulder injury.
Oh, yeah.
But in essence, Freo would start and finish the game strongly, stopping the rot of their 3 losses, and proving that last week was a bit more of an aberration, more than anything in terms of their game style. The Bulldogs, however, had a chance to win this in the third quarter, where they had territory dominance, but it was inaccurate kicking that they only managed 2 goals for the third quarter, going from 7-3 to 9-10, including a rare miss from the Bonts, only 15 metres away on an angle, took a great mark in the centre square, just outside the centre square, and it just sort of summed the Bulldogs' quarter, because really, there wasn't, that was it. That was the only reason that it wasn't a tight contest, because they kept with them the entire night.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was a very, the Bulldogs still have a few of their problems. Rear, it's still not 100% in the clearances, and their defense, as I said, it's still rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think they can. I think that's sort of the Bulldogs that they want to. The effort that they want to see week in, week out. I don't think they were too far off the pace. Fremantle just played pretty well. And yeah, Fremantle did get a lot of possessions in the middle of the ground in both stoppage play and transition.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who's back, baby? It's Nat Fife.
Damn
Wound
right
back
it
the
is.
clock. Added so much excitement to Freo's play. They're all like, oh, Freo going stagnant again, blah, blah, blah. Fifey having none of that. 37 disposals, 27 effective, 18 contested, 7 clearances, 10 score involvements, 4 intercepts, 443 metres gained, kicked 1 goal 1, and he kicked a set shot. Freo fans will be rejoicing. That is a rare sighting from the Fifinator getting a set shot. Sarong also did a lot of damages from the centre. Same possessions as 537, 17 clearances, and yeah, it was pretty massive. But despite this clearance dominance, the Bulldogs actually mitigated a lot of it. and the score was actually fairly even for both teams. And Bulldogs actually scored a bit more from the center circle. I think it was like 2 goals to 3, basically. And in terms of overall, it was, not that much higher.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, although it was a lot of good work by Fremantle, it was a lot of good handballing. I think I mentioned it, like between Brayshaw, Sarong, and Fife for the first half. I think, did I say 80 or 90% of their possessions were handballs? It was crazy. It might
It
have
was a
been
pretty high
90.
statistic.
Yeah, it was just honestly insane. So yeah, so the Bulldogs actually they they sort of pressed fairly well. They got a lot of turnovers, a lot of pressure. So as I said, while it wasn't a clearance, you'd like to see a bit more. They did a bit better as the game went on, but especially in that third when they start get the game back on control. But throughout most of the game, it was Bontempelli that did
Mhm.
most of it. 27 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 7 clearances. So assisted by Ed Richards, who actually found himself. He actually led the centre bounce attendances. He attended 93% of them. But yeah, he wasn't really winning his own ball. He was more of a recipient. Kicked 7 inside 50s, 5 score assists,
Mhm.
and created 30 pressure acts. So again, while the Bulldogs weren't winning their own, pressure by Ed Richards prevented Freo from turning their gains into more scoring. And yeah, Trelaw sort of came in a bit late, ended the game with 29 disposals, 9 clearances, and 7 score involvements.
Mhm.
And honestly, the ruck battle it was one of those interesting things. It's like 2 ruck philosophies going at it. Went exactly as you thought it would. Darcy dominated the hit-outs, excellent tap work. English had a fantastic game around the ground, especially after his lesser game last week. I thought he put in quite a good effort. Was it last week or was it 2? I don't know. Anyway, English was great. But yeah, I will say both teams had very good chains off halfbacks and a lot of good runs, but it was the Dockers that I think were a lot more damaging, and they found a lot of play through the middle.
Mhm.
Whereas the Bulldogs sort of had to have the ball locked in their half to really start the chains that would end up in scoring shots. Aish took his 1 game dip. He got like 9 possessions last week, but now 27 disposals, 85% efficiencies, 12 marks, 5 of them intercept marks, 9 intercepts overall, 7 score involvements, and absolutely fantastic. But he wasn't even the best halfback. Bailey Dale, he's a man possessed. He's telling Bevo, don't drop me again. Yeah, he got 30 disposals and 2 goals and a lot of good general play. Bit less interception, but he sort of, he wasn't like the true halfback. He was sort of that positionless player where
Yep.
he just roamed between the wing and the forward line. Chapman for Freo, I thought had a very good game coming back. He actually had to go on lob once Draper got down, and he kept him very quiet. Lob really didn't have an impact at all. Got involved in a few chains of possessions. But yeah, it was actually a lot of the Bulldogs' movement was sort of actually stifled from very iffy play off halfback.
Mhm.
Bramble, DeRay, Johannesson really couldn't provide all that much. They were a bit sloppy, especially Johannesson. Like, he got a few times where he was looking to try and break the game, but he just, he couldn't quite get there. There's a fair few turnovers. It just wasn't happening for him. So they were sort of just stuck with a lot of the wider sort of play. Um, Pierce and Ryan, talking about deeper defenders here now, didn't let many deep entries in, but some just had quiet performances. Neither had their head down, but sort of a lot of the opponents they're on found opportunities up the field. It's just, the Bulldogs weren't looking to attack deep, and, Pierce and Ryan were just keeping them honest more than anything.
Yep.
Liam Jones, best defender of the night, 7 interceptions, 10 1%ers, and, a pretty solid job. On the flip side, Karmas, great intercept defender, but matched up with Tracy performing well, he just sort of got a bit outclassed. He's still, I don't think you can sort of trust him quite yet for the big body hidey one-on-one matchups that some defenders can get away with. Sort of not his strength, but as I said, sort of just had to for that particular matchup.
So I'm
So
having a look at the stats as we're going through this, and
yeah,
I'm looking at Karmas, and for the entire game, he only had 5 meters gained with his ball usage.
yeah, that would be about right. Like he couldn't get involved in the chains. Like he was playing a very um, you know, uh, rigid game because I think a lot of his possession was still handballs. He didn't actually have that much kicks. It was 5-5, so I misremember that bit. But yeah, honestly, as I said, it was just like I'm not calling him out, but from what's been a shining bit of
Of the
Western
Doggies
Bulldogs
defense,
defense,
yeah.
Fremantle found a way to nullify it, and that's by just uh, really solid attack through the center of the field, and that's also the other point I want to make from the sort of attack. It was a lot about conversion, but what helps with that, Freo had a lot of direct down the line, straight in front of goals. They were taking the tough contested marks inside 50.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of just gave them a few more easier set shots from about 30 and 50 out. Tracy, as I mentioned, got 3 inside 50 marks. Banfield, again, 3. And the young debutant, Voss, from Essendon, didn't get a game. Very hyped. Reasonably hyped, I should say. And, he provided a lot. So they beat the Bulldogs 59 in terms of the mark inside 50.
Oh, yeah.
As I said, the Bulldogs are very wide in their attack. So yeah, as I said, so for Buka Karmas, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it was because, they weren't sort of allowing, like, he was stuck in that central contested thing, he wasn't getting space outside of the play, once that intercept happened to break free, you know what I mean? Like, they were having to work a lot harder to get that ball outside of, and, it's what I mentioned before with the high turnover rate of their other halfbacks, it was a bit down, but Freo were making a lot harder for them. So, excellent pressure from them. In terms of the Bulldogs' pressure, Riley West provided a lot of it. He was very good. Got a lot of tackles inside 50s. What was I going to say? Oh, of course. Bulldogs attacking. Who we see again? Lob doesn't show up. It's I wanted to say Sam Darcy.
It is Sam Darcy.
Sam Darcy. Oh, of course, yeah, Sam Darcy. Yeah, Luke Darcy threw me off. No, Sean Darcy. I'm all over the place. Yeah. Yeah, he had a fantastic game. A couple of marks. Not quite like Tracy. He actually found a lot of his goals from a couple from loose play. But still very impressive, and definitely was probably one of the better presenters for the night. By memory, I think Aaron Norton still had a solid night as well. I think he kicked. He kicked
Norton
2
had
goals.
2, Darcy had 3-1.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was very spread, as I was saying, because yeah, as I said, it's not so much that Frio's was smothering defense. It's just they forced them up, which the Bulldogs can attack from. But you know what I mean. It just makes it a lot harder. And as I said, as I said, at the start, they were very efficient. They were scoring a lot more than they should, and then just sort of had that lapse when they finally could get a few deep entries. It was a bit disappointing, but, on the same side, like, they kept with it for most of the game. I don't think they'll, put their head too far down. It's just, I guess a bit frustrating overall for Bulldogs fans because, there were bits that, weren't quite on for the Bulldogs, but again, they're still playing solid football. It was still in their style. Still generating a lot of turnovers. It was just bits and pieces again. And, it's just a bit concerning when, as I said, Bulldogs can go from very impressive to, slightly behind the mark than what they need to be in certain areas. So, as I said, it'll be interesting to see where the Dogs are at the end of the season because I don't know. What do you reckon? Do you reckon they'll find a bit of consistency, or is it just going to be a case of up and down for them?
Like they have the team and the structure to be able to have better consistency and better performances, but it's just,
Yes, no doubt about that.
I mean, you look at the quality of teams that they're going up against. Like they have played some pretty good teams already, but they still
Yeah,
have to play some of those teams again. And on
exactly.
just on how on where they're at the moment, I don't see them beating at least half the teams in the top eight.
Yeah,
And it's 50-50 on, actually it's probably more like a 75-25, I'll be honest, as to whether they beat
yeah.
those other half teams in the top eight. So it's like they've got a chance to put on some better performances against stronger teams, but I think they might possibly miss the mark with where they're at the moment.
That's sort of another question I want to ask. Are we overlooking the Bulldogs' Achilles heel, which is generally their bowl use? Like in every area of the ground, like the Bulldogs have a few players that you just don't quite trust to, convert when possible. Obviously, a lot of talk about Caleb Daniel, used to be one of the best short kick in the competition. Um, I'm guessing he's just a bit out of form as well. I don't exactly know what's going on with that situation there, but when you imagine the sort of player you want to see on the football field, an informed Caleb Daniel would be it.
Yeah,
We're sort of seeing Taylor DeRay, Lucky Bramble, Harms, just, and none of them had terrible, terrible games. I think DeRay was probably,
but
a bit
they're
off the
also the
pace, but
players that you kind of don't entirely trust with to have consistent ball
exactly.
usage.
And as I said, and then you look in the forward line where you got like Rory Lobb still getting a game, and I know that Jamari Hagan should be as a straight swap, but in games where he's forced to play, yeah, sorry, in games where Jamara's played, then you get Norton that goes quiet all of a sudden,
Hmm.
and it's just like, is it ever? I don't know, like, because they have all the pieces, but is there actually that formula for the Bulldogs that will work? And will there be enough time in this season to find it? Like, that's the main thing. Um, I'm posing that as a question for you, as if you could, like, figure out all the answers.
I mean, I
I'm sure
wish I
there's a
had
fair
all the
few
answers.
Bulldogs. Exactly, like, but I don't think there is, like, Bevo, I'm not going to put him in the coaching Hall of Fame, but, he does know what he's working with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it's always, I think people get a bit critical on selections, and, there's parts where you've seen where Bevo, like backing in Norton, who's coming a bit good now and sort of just tinkering around. So as we'll see, it's just, I don't know. I feel like there's going to be a lot of muck before we see where the Bulldogs are this year. But I'm not necessarily like down on them. It's just, you know, it's just weird.
yeah,
Like
very hot and cold.
I'd say there's some optics that are very good on the Bulldogs. It's just, you just hope that throughout this period they keep at least in the mix. If they drop to the bottom bit of the ladder, you just probably put a line through them.
Yeah,
But if they keep around the mid pack, I could see them stringing 5 wins in a row
I don't
just as easily.
I don't think they'll drop to bottom six, but
Oh,
there's
I don't
also a
think they
big
will.
chance that they might not even make top eight.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's just,
But as I said, it's just how that will happen is very,
yeah, it's just hoping they find some
interesting.
consistency and just try and get better
Yeah,
usage out of the players that they have,
yeah.
apart
And
from
I
the
want to,
ones that always stand out.
yeah. And as you can imagine, like I think Freo were back on the pace again. So they needed this win because
Absolutely.
as I said, is 2 unlucky wins, one just you know duck egg performance really when it counted, and then as I said, they needed to stamp some authority, play some good football, and I think they did that. And especially last week when I said there was a lot of question about their depth, especially like obviously their halfback, which has been tested, has done quite well.
Hmm.
I said the return of Walker, sorry, not Walker, Chapman.
Yeah, that's right.
Walker's come back in. As I said, the emergence of Draper, hopefully he comes back as soon as he's healed up from injury. They'll get some players to replace him. But yeah, a couple of changes this week. Again, we've already talked about Voss, but also Simpson for Freo. Um, sort of played sort of wing, sort of forward. He was very involved in forward option change. Wasn't the focal point of any form of attack, but Voss wasn't the focal point of attack, but presented when needed. Simpson didn't get that much possession. He had to play 50% of the game, but provided a lot of speed and class and pressure. Rotated the wing spot with Johnson, who sort of plays a bit more anemically. And I want to say, like, as a short sample size, but he got involved with four score involvements. It was a lot of fast run, and it's sort of a bit what Freo are missing on that wing position. Or, well, maybe not missing, because they could obviously move someone like Aish up there, but when he's playing so good down at back, on that half-back line, it would be nice if they could actually put a bit of investment to see how the Simpson and Jeremy Sharp goes, because that could be the future for Freo. Jeremy Sharp had a bit of a down match. Nothing really to say about that, but for a traditionally cursed position for Freo, all their players leave once they get the wing, but hopefully they'll build on that, because a lot of good signs there.
Yeah, I think Freo have put themselves in a good position going into the next couple of rounds. Hopefully with the loss of like a couple of good players, it won't matter too much. I think they found some good form. Nat Fyfe bringing back some vintage performances. It's good to see him in good form. It's always good to see Sarong step up after he's had a couple of quiet weeks. So,
and I didn't mention Brayshaw or Young, but both of them were still around the mark. Brayshaw sprayed it a bit early, but was very good in the back half. And Young just sort of, I would say he was more of a complimentary role this week. It's always hard when you have, Nat Fyfe and Sarong getting so much possession, sometimes it's just impossible to have three performers in the midfield of that quality. But, Young was, still getting there in score involvements. Kicked a goal himself, that was pretty good. And, still developing quite nicely. So, obviously, it was sort of what you were expecting last week, especially with the Jackson-Darcy combination, and, as I said, I didn't even mention that, actually. Jackson kicked 2 goals too, and you could definitely see that sort of, I think I was meant to mention it in the ruck, that sort of just seemed, it seemed like what it should be, Jackson did a pretty good job when he was covering for Darcy in the ruck, but Freo are going to be a lot better in the long term with this Darcy-Jackson combination, where Jackson's a forward person that can, take the load off Darcy if needed.
Yeah.
Especially since they're both on longer contracts, they'll be complementing themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if Darcy gets injured, Jackson can cover. It's just, it'll work as long as those two are fit and available. If both are injured, it just sucks.
That's just unlucky.
Yeah, it's just, hopefully it won't happen. Touch wood.
No, hopefully not. All right, Sunday games. Do you want to briefly talk about Hawthorn Sydney, or do we want to just kind of leave that as it is?
Yeah, the good things we mentioned about Hawthorn last week?
Yeah, it didn't happen this week.
No, in fact, it was quite the opposite. It was a lot of mid performances by a few of the players that we actually thought stood out last match. So it was a bit disappointing to see that they didn't follow it up. It sort of actually, I looked a bit of it. It did actually seem a bit worse than it sort of was. Like, some of the effort wasn't that great, and they got absolutely hammered in most disposals. But most major
areas.
Yeah, exactly. But they had a few minor wins. They won the clearances, and honestly, if it wasn't for the fact they were so wasteful in front of goal, they weren't that. It would have still been a dropping, but it wouldn't have been that bad. So, but yeah, I mean, at the same time,
Sydney are just still one of the best teams in the competition right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And as I said, they've got again, and this was so surprising about last week. It was like the bits and pieces sort of thing about Hawthorn. They're not. It's just you hope that it's not just going to be either completely glued. It's like they're held together with super glue that's like too strong,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever it doesn't work, it tears apart instead of the flexibility to move things around and all that sort of thing. So it's going to be a tough for Mitchell, I think, to find what Hawthorn need on any given day to be competitive, but that's just the pains of a rebuild.
I think against most teams, they just don't have the right matchups, and well, in some cases they do because I think Will Day again is one of their best players
Yeah,
at
when
this
he
point in
comes
time.
back, yeah.
Mitch Lewis also really really good. I think Blake Hardwick is also fairly consistent, fairly decent player, but it's just most of the time they just don't have
Yeah.
the right matchups on their opponents, and it's just something that they need to work through. And whether it's getting better players, going into the draft, work. I mean, they're in a
Yeah, I feel
as you
like
mentioned, they're in a rebuild anyway. But it's like there's a lot
yeah,
of
it's just,
development process.
I mean, it's in weird because like they're obviously two different teams and they've got two different floors, but in the similar like togetherness about Hawthorn and North is just they've busted on a bit too many draft picks and it's starting to really hurt now. Hawthorn obviously I think have done a bit more better job bringing in players, and hell, even they've actually got a few more picks right in a shorter amount of time. Um, but again, that's just sort of how North's been. I don't want to rag on them too much, but yeah, it's just not quite complete. You know what I mean? Like you don't look at this team and you want to look at a couple of young players to really want to be hopeful about, and it's not quite there really. You know what I mean? It's who are you getting excited? Like maybe Josh Weddle, Jai Newcomb. Even Newcomb's getting to the age where he should be, performing a bit more consistently. So, yeah, I don't know. It's concerning, but hopefully, the optics might change after a week.
Yeah, I mean,
And a bit of a better performance.
you just gotta hope that you have solid performances against the weaker teams and just try and show up
Yeah.
against the stronger teams. But
Yeah, exactly. It might not seem as bad in a year's time, but it's still concerning. Again, why I had North above them in terms of winning the game
yeah,
last week.
that's
But
why we went with North because North on
just
paper just looks like
yeah,
a better team.
exactly. So yeah, and Sydney, all the performances you would expect to see went big. Did Florent had a great game.
Joel Lamarty, I think, kicked
Logan
4 goals.
Yeah, Logan McDonald kicked 3 goals free. Yeah, that was good. It's just that's it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's really surprised, like in that case.
Yeah.
All right, now
Yeah.
onto the match that it's probably the biggest one for us because it's technically the coast to coast match between Gold Coast and West Coast, even though neither of us support either of these teams. And
Yeah, I mean,
it's just
honestly,
purely coast to coast by name, but it's still, makes
yeah.
sense for us to have a bit of excitement around it.
I mean, to be honest, like, I will admit, when I think coast to coast, I definitely mean, like, in my mind, WA to Victoria. Like, I've been critical of the Suns, but I do wish for their success, and so in terms of that, it's sort of yeah, like it's just what do I want to say? Yeah, Gold Coast teams historically haven't done well ever, and
True.
it'll be interesting to see how they go. And I generally want WA teams to go well, but yeah, it's definitely when I think of coast to coast, it's definitely WA hating Victorians.
Great, yeah, but every state
I
hates
just want to settle that before we get into the game.
every state hates Victorians and every state hates
Yeah.
New South Wales. That's kind of just how it is.
Yeah. I'll give they're a bit like I think the thing with Queensland and WA is like we have that shared connection of the heat exactly melting our brains and making us like 20 IQ lower. than we should be.
Hey, I mean, you said it, not me. My hands are
We're
off
pretty
on that
chill
one.
though.
So the scoreline for this game
Suns and Eagles. Yeah.
was 17-10, 112 to 12-3, 75. West Coast converting really, really well in front of goal, considering they only kicked 3 behinds overall, but it was still Gold Coast game to win. They put on a really, really strong second half performance to come home by 37 points.
37.
Yes, I can do math. Matt Rowell had another best on game performance, finishing with 22 touches, 18 contested possessions, 8 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 2 goals, 5 score involvements, 13 tackles, and 32 pressure acts. Easily the most dominant midfielder on the board. Sam Collins had another strong game in half-back, finishing with 96 touches at 87.5% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 13 intercepts at 100% time on ground. He was definitely needed when matching up. I think he played a little bit against Elliot Yeo and against Jake Waterman.
Yeah.
Veteran Jared Witz looks really, really good in the ruck, which is always good to see, especially, tall player going into their twilight years. It means their legs are starting to struggle.
He's still in
so
vastly in his form. Again, I still have him the best tap ruckman in the league, but only with the caveat that Sean Darcy hasn't played consistent.
Yeah.
In terms of literal games enough.
No, I agree. As long as his legs hold up, I think Witz is 100% still the best tap ruckman.
Yeah.
He finished with 46 hitouts. I believe majority of those were to advantage. 18 touches, 12 contested, 10 clearances, 5 inside 50s, 7 score involvements, and 8 tackles.
Yeah, no, he's pretty good. And it was a very, I don't know if you read the stat, but if you haven't, hitouts 63 to 18.
That was pretty massive domination.
It was rough. Shout out to our constant coast-to-coast trier, BJ Williams, but of all the matches...
Jared Witz is probably the worst one to go up against.
It was. He was still trying, but, even for his, it was just underperformance for him. I wouldn't slam him or anything, but you know what I mean? It's just, oof.
No, he's not the worst ruckman in the world.
Office.
It was just a tough day at the office.
Oh, look, in terms of starting ruckman, he definitely is the worst. But
don't have to say it out loud.
Is there upside for him? Well, he would probably admit it. He's playing 2 years probably before he should even see the football field, and is competing every week he needs to. And I've got a mad amount of respect for him, but this was where you could see where it was really starting to hurt the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the fact that they don't have their midfield bull out there this week. WA are already crying the fact that Harley Reid is not playing.
I know that, but when you look at the first half, it wasn't that Gold Coast weren't winning these clearances and all that. They still were. They were dominating. It wasn't exactly that specifically, I would say, that, West Coast sort of weren't in it, because...
They definitely were in it for the first half.
Yeah, but it was a very weird game. It was so uncontested. You'd have periods of the game where it almost felt like, West Coast actually had a fair chunk of possession, but, Gold Coast were almost sort of waiting for the error. You know what I mean? So it would just be a lot of, chippy play, it's sort of a game that existed a lot of the time in between the arcs.
Yeah.
But, once West Coast did get it in there, they found a few options. Obviously, Waterman had a fantastic game. Darling even got a couple of marks and a couple of goals, which was good to see. But yeah, as I said, eventually, I think the Eagles just got a bit gassed, really. It was sort of hard, because, I'm not sure if I'd exactly say they were outrun, but they were sort of outpaced, and I don't know how that makes sense, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it
wasn't
weird argument.
It was more... it was more like Gold Coast eventually just found a bit more space, and that made their attacks always a bit better than West Coast attacks, which again were very up and down. You know, and they're very reliant on a couple of players. Obviously, you mentioned Elliot Yeo, Liam Duggan, also very good off that halfback where he found a lot of the ball because it was just swinging in between there. But you know what I mean? It was just eventually it was just the down wall breaking, and I'm not sure if it was concerning that Gold Coast was sort of waiting for it because
Well, that's
if you've got a tactic and you win that comfortably, it's not the worst thing. It's just it's not like, it's weird. Like if you look at the stats and you look at the scoreline, it's like, wow, Gold Coast were really impressive, but it was very yeah.
it was
Like,
it was a game.
Again,
It was a game.
yeah. It was just, it was almost a bit too casual at time for the Gold Coast. And, when the game was in the balance, the question marks, were Gold Coast gonna, win a game that they should have? Is this gonna go back to form? But they did what they needed to do.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, props to them.
But yeah, the whole waiting for an error and then capitalizing on it is the Dimmer game plan. That's the type of style that he coaches, and it works perfect for this team.
But like, you know what I mean? It's just like the pressure, it wasn't quite the same, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like a hugely pressured halfback line that was forcing Eagles to take bad options or whatever. It was just sort of, Eagles just making a few errors. And still solid defense, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. Like it wasn't that Gold Coast had an insane amount of tackles or anything. Like, it was like Gold Coast still won in that regard, but it was still fairly standard. But, it was just sort of weird. It was almost like Gold Coast sort of knew that they were going to win the game beforehand and just sort of went so, not lackadaisical, but it's weird because it sounds like I'm slagging them, but like honestly, they play good. It's just I'm really befuddled.
It was just a really
game
weird
that
game.
turned out. Yeah, it was just bizarre, but also good for the Gold Coast. Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's a win, and that's what they needed.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And for West Coast, they were enough in the contest. Still okay.
They showed some good promise away from home, considering their only 2 wins have been at Optus.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good to see some consistency away from WA.
Yeah,
Jake,
and I will say they did miss.
Yeah, go on.
Barras.
Yeah, they
because
did.
While I did think that they defended fairly well structurally, Ben King really took advantage of the fact that they were, basically forced McGovern to play a bit more, not loose, and it forced everyone to a one-on-one contest. I think Cole had, I can't remember, was it?
He had it underrated. He had a really, really good game.
Harry Edwards. So, tough role for the young defender coming back in, but you know what I mean? It's just they had that exposure there, and it was a bit on paper, but I don't think the Eagles' defense was that terrible. It was just more sort of movement. It wasn't quite as clean as last week, and I said, when you can't get that hands on the ball, it was just, there's really not much you can do.
Yeah, no, it's the Suns forward and midfield lines do provide a lot of pressure, and sometimes it's just too much.
Yeah,
it's just that
that's kind of how. It's just weird how indirect a lot of this pressure was.
Yeah, like it wasn't even like from direct tackles or like actual pressure acts. It was,
and I will admit, like the free kick count didn't help in terms of that. Like I'm not going to say like, oh, free kick Gold Coast, they didn't deserve, because a lot of times I feel like they did. Obviously, Williams gave away a few free kicks. And a lot of the contests, because they were getting beaten so far, they started clinging on to jumpers and all of that. But you know what I mean? It does, I guess, artificially make the game a bit uncontested as well. So yeah. I will say that in Gold Coast defense. But yeah, it's just It was just weird to watch. It was a very Sunday lazy, it was just like the sort
It's
of
a very casual
game that
Sunday
you
afternoon game.
exactly. It was just perfect to have on the background, but it was very weird when you actually looked into it.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
agree. Um, yeah, you mentioned Jake Waterman before. Again, he's been a revelation since Oscar Allen's been out.
Oh, beautiful.
He
Yeah.
kicked 4 goals in this game and 15 across the past 3 games, which is
hmm
slingshotted
Third in the
him
Coleman, I
straight up
think.
into the Coleman, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Um, he finished the game in total with 15 touches at 80% efficiency, 4 inside 50s and 7 score involvements as well. Um, for the Eagles backline, I thought you did kind of mention him before, but Tom Cole, I thought had a really underrated game.
Yeah.
20 touches at 60% efficiency, which isn't the greatest efficiency, but 7 contested possessions. He had 12 intercepts and 19 pressure acts. I believe he was playing predominantly on Anderson,
Yeah.
but
I think so.
I know they were rotated around a little bit. Maintenance are
Yeah,
usually.
because man, I think he went on Ainsworth occasionally when he sort of got away from Hoff occasionally.
Mhm.
So again,
Yeah, he
yeah, I
had
said
he
with Barassa, they sort of had to move the pieces around, but it wasn't concerning. Concerning is just
no, and it's
no,
like he had pretty tough opponents to match up on, but I thought for the
yeah,
most part he did pretty well for himself.
yeah,
And then Sam Closey, unfortunately, shoulder injury. He'll be out for quite a few games, which is really unlucky because I thought
should have
for the
been a
games that
rising
he
star
has
by
played,
now.
absolutely he should have been rising star.
Yeah,
Um, I will mention the rising star a little bit later on. It did go to one of his teammates, which we'll talk about.
okay, I know who we're
And
talking about now. Yeah,
and yeah, overall just a weird game, but good on Gold Coast
weird
for getting the
game.
4 points.
Yeah, as I said, much like the Sydney game, it was the usual contenders: Flanders, Rao, Miller, Anderson, all going bang, and then yeah, just sort of yeah, everyone. Mac Andrews as well.
Mac Andrew had
As I said,
another good
it
performance.
was that weird, pressure, but that was a lot of it. Like he had a lot of he was stalking. He was stalking. I don't think he actually had that as many intercepts as normal, but he had a lot of spoils, and he was preventing a lot of those longer entries in. So, as I said, for again another team with a defense that's more fledgling. Sorry, for a rebuilding team, like they're joining the other where the defense is a bit behind other areas, but as I said, McAndrews is probably the centerpiece you build. Then not new because they've still got solid people down there, but you know what I mean. It's just you know player you build around to hopefully make it solid enough to where you can win comfortably just by always scoring more than your opponent and still just doing enough in the defensive efforts. So yeah,
Yep.
again, solid by Gold Coast, still on the track. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, it's just consistency from West Coast is what we're after, and so far they're providing really, really well. And it's just
Yeah,
if
it's
Gold Coast
like
can just keep
what
winning, they're gonna keep trying to fight for their first finals campaign.
exactly. It's like what there was maybe 5 games overall where West Coast was sort of in it last year,
Mm.
and now we've got 5 games in a row where as I said,
And 2 of them have been
it
wins.
depends how harsh you want to be whether you count this, but I think there was a lot of good signs.
Yeah,
But yeah, as I said, it's just yeah, as I said, it was quite clear that that ruck thing more than
was
any other,
gonna be a big
you
issue.
know, and maybe it was a bit of a luck that last week they got Darcy coming off the injury, but they made the most of that at least. So at least when they did have that opportunity, they scored, and they'll try and find ways while they don't have that option until Thingo eventually gets back for mainly next year. Why am I blanking? Matt Flynn.
Yes,
Flynn?
Flynn.
No. Yes, Flynn.
I think it's Flynn. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't pay too much attention to WA
Yeah, from
ruckman.
GWS, yeah. Oh, wow. Nick Nat, unsubscribed.
Okay, I'll
He
pay
was
attention to
listening
Nick
in.
Nat. Nick Nat's great.
Swan District's legend, by the way.
All right, enough of that. We're going to move on to what the ladder currently looks like at the end of round 7. Yes, round 7 is what we were in.
Yeah.
So Geelong, so nothing's changed.
Major
Surprise,
changes, yeah,
surprise.
nothing.
Nothing really too drastic. So the top 4 is Geelong, Sydney, GWS, and Melbourne. The rest of the
Mhm.
8 is Port, Carlton, Essendon, and Freo. Hot on Freo's heels and a hot on Essendon's heels are the Gold Coast Suns, sitting at ninth position. Collingwood 10th. Western Bulldogs, Adelaide Crows, Brisbane Lions, St Kilda are 11th to 14th. And then the bottom 4 are the West Coast Eagles, um, Richmond, unlucky, Hawthorn, and North Melbourne. So I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's too surprised as to what the ladder currently looks like.
Oh yeah, for sure. Obviously in terms of games coming up, which we'll talk about in a second, Gold Coast probably have the most important game coming up. Maybe Collingwood Carlton as well. Um, I don't actually expect Carlton to win, but wouldn't be out of the picture for Collingwood to pinch that. So
No,
you know,
it's not out of the realm of
consider
possibility.
exactly. So again, Essendon have West Coast, Fremantle have Richmond. You think hopefully for those two teams, I would win that. Yeah, pretty big games. Because as I said, after this round, it could separate a bit more. For the teams trying to come back into the 8.
Well, this entire
And
this
also,
entire round is full of big clashes.
the top 4 all playing each other. It's massive.
Well, not just
And
that, but it's all of the other clashes besides the Derby. It's the
yeah,
showdown. It's the battle for the bridge. It's the Q clash.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
all of the
exactly.
key
And
sort of rivalries that
hmm,
like the AFL thrive on, and they're all so
yeah,
early in the
exactly.
season.
Yep. There's always one or two matches that sort of come together like this, and again, I'm sort of ruining the fact that I'm going to be away. I definitely won't get most. I might be able to get like I might be able to get a Sunday match. Might try and catch the Q Clash if I can, but uh,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
usually just really, really badly timed this trip.
I know it's upsetting me, but you know
Granted,
what?
I've badly
I've
timed
been
my
told there's
trip.
more to life about. I've been told there's more to life than football.
This
I'm
is
not
true.
sure yet, but yeah, you want to go through
Yeah,
any of the
so
matchups that you think will?
well, we'll start Thursday night with the showdown,
Mhm.
Adelaide and Port. I don't think. Well, the things with big marquee games like this is that the teams that you don't expect to win typically give a pretty
Sometimes
solid
do.
performance.
Yeah, it's a very ladderless sort of matchup, especially because you have the Derby, which normally, most of the time, Western Derby, I should say,
Yeah,
goes to ladder position. But Adelaide and Port really, they love being a thorn in each other's side. Obviously, the last few showdowns have gone to Adelaide, so Port will be keen to get back
try and
a sort
square
of bit
up.
of dominance. And again, I think this year they're just looking to convince people that they're actually contenders. So they sort of need to win this game.
Mm.
At the same time, sort of mentioned before, Adelaide's forward line, that will be the biggest thing. Port, for the most part, actually defended okay last week after a pretty woeful performance against Collingwood. And the midfield battle, as I said, Adelaide's really starting to come together in that regard. And Port, they're not the best in the competition, but they've got a lot of talent there, and they do generally win a lot of clearances and get a lot of attack off it. So
Will
it'll be
will
interesting.
will the loss of Rose matter a lot, being that he is the
Hmm.
captain.
I mean, you would rather have him. Like, I think Port have enough depth to where you can find different sort of players. Honestly, I don't know. I just think that there's like more pertinent issues about Port that I'm worried about. That again, particularly with some of their conversion up forward. Uh, so yeah, as I said, it'll be interesting. Again, Adelaide, their tolls are pretty good this year, especially for young players. Again, Worrell Butts, Keane.
Hmm.
So if anything, the luck of Rosie worries me in the fact that it's one less quality distributor. Kicking inside forward 50
hmm
puts a lot of pressure on Butters. Um, so yeah, as I said, it might make Port fall in the trap of just blazing away in terms of pure forward entries. But yeah, it's. I'm not saying put a line through them because of it. I'm not even saying it would change the swing much. Then maybe like a couple of percent, but you know, there's also like legitimate reasons to be worried about this game, even though Adelaide are so lowly on the ladder this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Port are very much favourites going into this, and I think Port will win. But who knows? Adelaide is looking better as they keep going on throughout the season. As you
Yeah,
said, Port's still a little 50-50 in some areas that they're still trying to work on. Um, Loss of a couple players will allow them to have to try and utilize their depth. So
yeah,
it
for
could
sure.
it
I
could
think we got
still end
players
up
in
being a
there.
pretty
Yeah,
interesting game.
you might see Mead shift to a full game. Maybe Josh Sin gets a debut. I think he's coming back from injury. There's another one. It doesn't matter. So yeah, so it'll be interesting seeing selection. But yeah, hopefully it'll be another thrilling showdown. Like there've been some crackers, but um, oh, I don't know. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that I'm probably not going to see this game and like focus on my friends and all of that because I don't
Possibly.
know. Maybe they don't want to see like a person a nervous wreck shouting at a TV. you know.
Very true. Very true.
Uh,
All right, the Friday night blockbuster between Collingwood and Carlton at the
the
MCG.
traditional rivals. Oof.
This, with Collingwood finding some good form recently,
Mm,
they've finally figured out some of their issues. They're starting to very strongly compete with the harder teams to match up against.
yeah.
They could really take it to Carlton this week.
Especially defensively. Like if this was
Absolutely.
round 3, it was just like no, Carlton. Like
Yeah, you just put
Collingwood's
Carlton
defense are a bit in
100%.
shambles. And even the midfield. You know what I mean? Like you just see that clear domination. But now, I'll still favour Carlton, but it's a lot iffier.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I would still probably favor Carlton in this sense, but
yeah.
it really is a 50-50 match, I think.
And again, like coming off a bit of an iffy one, like I wouldn't be surprised if Brain Marchek had a pretty. I guess it really depends who wagering goes on. He might, but if they can get the ball to ground, I think they might be able to expose Kong, who, as I mentioned before, still have a bit of fine tuning to do
hmm
defensively. So as I said, they'll look to create the opening from there. It is a bit hard to see the fact that it is a bit hard to imagine Carlton not winning a lot of the territory and that coming from getting first hands on the ball,
Yep.
especially through the midfield and stoppages. But um, you know, I wouldn't rule Collingwood out. It's just it's weird. It's like a definitely tick Carlton, but it's I'm not. I don't know, maybe 65-35 sort of game. It's just it's a clear edge, but it's not
It's
ridiculously
not a
out of hand for
dramatic
Collingwood.
edge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not the Essendon edge.
No,
It's
absolutely not.
a little nick on Schnicko. You know, maybe first slip, not going a third.
All right, time for Super Saturday, and it starts with the Battle of the Bridge between Sydney and GWS.
Yeah, I think this was I think at the start of the season, we both were fairly high on these two teams and looking forward to this contest. And as the rounds go on, it's the more and more we sort of want to see it. Um, Giants again, so dominant around the ground. So finding various forms of attack, like I said about Geelong, how they did, but that's like forward 50, where Geelong is, Giants are from intercept, from back half movement, from the middle. They're the complete offensive package. While Sydney are strong, scrappy. They'll take aspects of your game away from you, so it'll be interesting to see if they can sort of nullify the
Mm-hmm.
Giants a bit.
Yep.
Um, it's a lot to nullify. Um, and there have been moments where Sydney haven't quite looked as complete as the Giants. So, I mean, you just got to respect the Giants. But I think this is actually a bit closer than Carlton and Collingwood. Even I'm not
Yeah,
really
this really
sure
could
that
be like a single-digit
in either
scoreline.
way. It's yeah. I honestly, I'm trying to think. Is there more anticipated? Because there have been times where these two have been top four together, or at least like nearabouts. But I don't know. This one just feels a bit different. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me getting a bit more excited about this season. But
Well, I mean,
I'm
in
hoping.
terms of form, I think these teams are probably at the best that they've ever been since GWS has been introduced into the competition.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it
I'll say
probably is
that.
their most anticipated matchup.
And I guess even with Sydney, like when the Giants were competitive, but you didn't really believe in them. Sydney were starting to be a bit, in and around, but not that deep threat like other teams, like Adelaide, Richmond, obviously.
Yeah.
I think there was still a year of Hawthorn at that time, so
Yes.
yeah, um, yeah. So honestly, yeah, it's really good to see. Great for New South Wales football. Um, and
Absolutely.
yeah, but I will be stuck in a wedding, so I get to see it. I cry.
I
It's not because of
okay.
the wedding I want to be there. I'm
I
sorry.
might back the Giants into this. It might depend on the ins and outs for this. I think Sam Taylor's back this
Yeah,
week, if
maybe.
he isn't back already.
Yeah.
So that'll be a really big in for them. So and they'll have obviously Hogan, from suspension.
Mhm.
So they'll have the right pieces back. They'll have hopefully the right matchups. Trusting
Yeah.
Adam Kingsley. He knows what he's doing. I trust him completely. So I'm gonna
I mean,
back.
you trust the horse too, but it's
Yeah,
just
yeah. I mean,
yeah, I know what you
Horse has
mean.
been in the
It's
game
just
long term, but
exactly like Giants feel like this is a coming together where Sydney is a bit more, you know,
like that. I think Sydney have the
consolidarity
determination that
building.
they still need to win every game. Whereas I think
Yeah.
Giants are like, this is something we've been building towards. This win will
Yeah.
prove where we sit in the competition. Like, because yeah, they've played
Oh,
against
for sure.
strong teams, they've played against weak teams, and yeah, they've won most of their games. But being
Yeah,
able to beat like a solid top four team in a really good form will kind of
exactly.
push them over
Oh,
the
for
other
sure. Yeah.
mark, which is you know I'm gonna back him in for it. I think.
Yeah, for sure. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've talked a bit about this matchup anyway, so we won't talk a bit
No,
on it. So good on North Melbourne. Again, if I mean for St Kilda, it's don't let North get on top in the middle
yeah,
because that's where North, when they're looking good, tend to set up their play. And for North,
it's
it's
shut down St
okay. Let's
Kilda's
actually work
midfielders.
down on shutting down. And as I said, I want to reiterate, like for North, it's not just their backline. As I said, they're always very young, and you can't expect them to be perfect. But
Yeah,
it's a bit more pressure up the field as well. Be a bit more restricting. Honestly, it's tempting to tip North. If you're like doing the gauntlet and you're like, man, when am I going to tip North this season? I would be
this game
tempted
could be
to.
it for at this point in
I would be
time.
tempted to put it on North. It's still probably tip St Kilda. It's
Yeah,
just I don't want to.
North are an outside chance this week. I think.
Yeah. Anyway,
Uh,
Melbourne and Geelong.
Melbourne Geelong.
Good football.
Absolutely. This isn't one of those games that could also go either way because it's going to be
Yeah.
Hawkins and Cameron versus Lever and May. Two of the
Yeah.
best tall
And
forwards in the league versus the two best tall defenders in the league.
exactly. And I think this is the interesting. So for as good as I've said, like Geelong, they're well talking about. I think Melbourne also like they're very limiting to teams marking inside 50. So it is interesting to see if they will still be able to find the options.
Hmm.
Um, you know, um, and be able to convert against such a good defense. Obviously, we didn't really state it. Geelong's defense is still pretty damn good.
It is.
Um, so as I said, if Melbourne, play their typical game and they can get enough scores outside of their top forwards who are struggling, or even if their top forwards somehow get together, I don't think it will happen in this game, but it might. Yeah, like, I don't think this game's much more than, Lion Bowl, really. Like, as much as I'm adamant about Geelong and, willing to back them in as the best team in the comp, this might be the matchup that sort of doesn't favour them of all the top four. So, I'll still probably tip Geelong just to put my money where my mouth is, but I'll probably be like, yeah, man, I should have tipped Melbourne if the result goes the other way.
Yeah.
I got a feeling that they might win this, actually.
Well, I'm fairly 50-50 on this game. And it'll probably depend on ins and outs. If Melbourne are able to utilize players like Daniel Turner again and have some surprise forward entries, as well as being able to shut down Geelong's tall forwards, hopefully try and nullify some of their running carry across the midfield. Then, and obviously you need Melbourne's strong midfielders to actually show up. We've talked in the past about how Track and Oliver can kind of disappear in big games.
Yeah.
So you just want to hope that they also try and show up and have decent performances. So
exactly, especially since Geelong
50-50.
isn't exactly a powerhouse midfield as well. This might be the game that brings them back into it.
Yeah,
pick occasion.
This could be the chance that Geelong lose a match for the first time this season.
Yeah, for sure. Or they could randomly lose at Gold Coast.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
West Coast and Essendon. And I'm honestly, the West Coast could show up here. Nah. Again, it's another outside chance.
I think. Nah. I think you're underestimating how good Essendon's been in that middle part of the game. I think this is actually probably a lot worse optics. Probably even more so than the Gold Coast game. That being said, I hope they do put in a solid effort. I think West Coast might struggle here against a pretty diverse attacking Essendon forward line.
True.
So I think that's where they'll get. On the flip side, Essendon's defense is pretty crap. So
yeah, that's kind of what I'm banking on. Like, if you let Waterman actually able to take contested marks and just let him be free, like, they could pose an issue.
Yeah, and and what I said at Essendon, like, a lot of the games where they've won and it's been close, they've also just shot themselves in their own foot anyway. So they might be able to get a few more turnovers, which West Coast haven't really been getting this year. So that might be another avenue for them. But yeah, I'm a bit more confident in Essendon than I maybe should be. But especially since it is at Optus. But I just think, I think Essendon's midfield, and obviously Ruck as well, with Goldstein as well being a very, if he can get that 60% ruck contest, it will be very hard for Eagles to get started with a lot of their movement.
Oh, yeah, that's fairly agreeable.
And pressure as well.
Of course.
Essendon's pressure's been pretty good.
Alright, Sunday matchup at the MCG, a game that I will be attending. It'll be my final game before I go on holidays. Richmond and Freo. And yeah, I think honestly, Freo know how to beat us at the MCG. They've done it multiple times now. It's really unfortunate to see.
Don't have a poster of David Mundy on your.
Yeah. You don't have to remind me. I was at that game. I don't need to remember it.
Yeah.
Hey, we still won the premiership that year. I can't complain.
Yeah. But those locks will forever be embedded in your dreams. So no, seriously, it's Fremantle looked to be pretty good.
Well, considering what they showed us last week, you want to hope that they kind of have a similar performance here.
It's a weird optimism though, because Richmond obviously don't have that forward line. But, they've been creative, and, Fremantle, while they have done good at shutting down the tolls, teams can actually score against them with a few more creative entries. So it might actually be, I don't want to say blessing in disguise, because what happened to Richmond forward line,
Yeah, it's not
I
great.
can't really say that's much of a blessing.
No.
But it might actually be the way to go about it this match. And, if, as I said, the scrappier that Richmond can get that game, the more chance that they have of actually, coming close.
Well, I don't think
Otherwise,
Bolter's back this week just yet, so we're still going to have to
no.
contend with the options that we have.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm expecting
But-
Lafau to still be kind of somehow our primary forward option, which isn't a bad
Yeah.
thing. He's had some pretty good performances since debut, so I can't fault
and
him
that
too
pace,
much.
again, like is strong as well, which will sort of help because, he'll be up against like a sort of drifting, sort of defense. He might have to, stand tall, bring the ball to ground where he might be able to work a bit better than, Pierce and Ryan. So yeah, as I said, for him, it's like if they can if he can at least not let the ball get knocked away too far by, a pretty strong fist. Yeah, I think there might be some forward options for Richmond, but you are sort of making scenarios up for them at the same time.
It's just a lot of hope that we can
exactly
make something work
but,
out of thin air.
For where for a bit of a gap between the two teams, I don't think it's that as I said, Richmond being pretty impressive in terms of effort.
Yeah, we
most of the
can
year
keep up with teams. It's just whether we're able to run out of game because we're so young at the moment.
So yeah, just keep it scrapping.
Yep. Wet weather footy. Usually where we thrive is wet weather footy.
Yeah.
Moving on, Western Bulldogs and Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium. I think it's just going to be doggies by far. We just got to hope that Hawthorn again show a decent performance. Learn from the mistakes.
The time where the Bulldogs, but we go about inconsistent, but they do like to feast occasionally. They will put the screws on lesser teams, and it's a bit hard to see exactly where Hawthorn might be able to even up the contest a bit more. But as I said, I think both teams will just be looking for more even performances as well. Regardless
again,
of the
the doggies have been hot and cold again this year. You just gotta hope, that they don't kind of be a little bit lackluster.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Bulldogs fan base will be going in like a little, what is going on with the world if they do lose? Like,
I don't think they'll lose.
It would be terrible.
But if
I don't think they would.
If the margin is really close, that's probably where they'll see issues.
Exactly. But I'm just saying, it's just like, it's something that the Bulldogs just need to win because they've been so inconsistent in other areas. They can't afford to just muck around with a game at this point. Even though they're not technically far away, it's just optics, really. Like, they need cohesion, and against a team that might allow you to do that, it might be a way for them, and I think it probably will happen.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fair. Again, doggies favourites. We're all gonna go doggies pretty much, but hopefully it's a decent game at the end of the day. There's some positives to pull out of it that'll be nice to talk about next week.
Yeah.
And then final game of the round, and it is a banger.
Pineapple Grapple.
The Q Clash at the Gabba.
Yep. It's
an interesting matchup this season because
Brisbane
are very inconsistent. They're struggling to win at home at the moment. The Gold Coast Suns really solid. Oh, I'm trying to find the right sort of words. They're in really, really good form. They're not relying.
They're performing. They're not trailblazing,
but they're in a better form than what they have been.
Exactly.
Over
They've been
history.
A lot more, consistent to their, normal. They're consistent to what you would expect, given.
Yes.
Which has been really good.
Jim has been able to get the most out of them, which is very nice to see.
Exactly. But this is just sort of the thing where you're a bit like, who do you actually like? You probably put the Gold Coast as favourites.
Based on form, you'd go the Suns.
Yeah.
But because because it's at the Gabba, and two, it's technically a marquee game. You don't kind of really know.
No. And it's, as I said too, it's like, again, theoretically, if Brisbane turn up, like if Brisbane get going what they want to get going in like clearances and all that sort of jazz, they will expose Gold Coast backline. Like it's going to be very hard to defend off quick play out the center. Like they don't, Gold Coast just don't have the complete answers for Danaher, Hipwood, and I mean even Cameron. If the ball goes to ground.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, it's just it just hasn't happened for Brisbane. I think Gold Coast have shown enough, as I said, with Mac Andrews, providing that sort of intercept game. If it's, Brisbane not getting their hands on the ball first, it's going to be very hard for them. It would just be like most games with Brisbane where they just haven't been transitioning the ball all too well.
Yeah.
And Gold Coast will have a good chance to get while not an upset victory, it would be a very season-defining victory, especially if they did manage to get finals. And against a team that would be competing for that spot. Like I still put a line through Brisbane. I don't think they'll make finals, but they're still gonna go at it. It's just, yeah. It's a bit hard putting a line through Brisbane, but I've got a microphone in front of me.
True.
Might as well.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how I pick in this matchup. Like, yeah, again, based on form, you'd probably go the Suns, but Brisbane could show up finally.
I might tip with belief in this one. I want to believe that Gold Coast can win it, so I probably will tip them, but I'm not sure how sensible that is. It's just, and granted, I haven't actually watched Brisbane play for a bit. Unfortunately, they've had a lot of Thursday games, and which is the day that I'm not there. So, but yeah, as I said, it's just the befuddling.
Yeah,
very. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a hard game.
Now that I've mentioned it, I just remembered the last, the Gold Coast West Coast game, which as I said, I don't. I've said Gold Coast.
It's gonna just be one of those weird games again, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Speaking of Gold Coast, let's talk about the rising star, because Silky Suns forward Jake Rogers got the nod this week.
Yep.
He had a very solid performance. Not finished with 22 touches, including 13 contested. He was the number 14 draft pick from the 2023 draft. He also had his first goal in the game.
Yeah,
very good for him. 4 goal assists as well. So overall, very solid performance, and a big congratulations to him.
For sure.
He is,
and yep.
He is the 4th player out of the Gold Coast Academy team to make his debut this season, with the others being Jed Walter, Ethan Reed, and Will Graham. But he's the first out of the group of 4 to earn a Rising Star nod. So good for him.
Yeah, exactly. And Walters has provided a bit of a forward option, hasn't quite put it together. As I said, that's more of a longer term thing. But yeah, no, it's good to see a bit of a immediacy from, a bubbling young talent pool.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then, speaking of young talent pool, let's talk about the complete opposite and talk about a veteran who has hung up the boots
walking
this week.
off into the sunset. Exactly.
Rory Sloane, after 255 games, has hung up the boots effective immediately, which gives the Crows an option to go into the mid-season draft, which is good for them, because that's similar to what Sean Grigg did to us in 2019. So it's good that players are having those conversations. Is withholding a retirement to try and play like a farewell game later on in the season worth it, or is it better off making my decision early and benefiting the club in a better way?
Yeah. And obviously with Rory Sloane, it's such a freak sort of thing. It's the detached retina. If he plays again, similar to Mason Cox, he would either have to wear protective eyewear to prevent it happening again, or risk
don't take the risk.
damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And at his point of career, he's such a battler. Like honestly, he's played well through injury. A lot of the late 2000s and tens. You know, especially after what was it, Adelaide's grand final. He battled
In
with a lot of shoulder injuries,
yes,
concussion, face, and he would always come back, provide a bit of a contest, even if he, missed a few weeks afterwards. And then, as I said, amazing he reached so many games, considering he never really had the strongest of bodies. And it was amazing he was so contested, considering he never had the strongest of bodies. But, just a testament to his sort of willpower, tenacity, and let's not forget smarts too, because earlier on in his career, when he was tandem with Dangerfield, he was more of the, I guess, the smarter disposal, complemented by obviously Danger's freak ability to get possession,
yeah.
and
Back in the younger years,
he's
like
just,
they were an incredible duo.
yeah, exactly. And that pressure too, he was a relentless tackler as well. So yeah, I've got amazing amount of respect for Roy Sloane, probably my favourite Adelaide player from that period.
Yeah.
And I hope he surfs a very well earned break in the I don't know where he goes surfing. He's Victorian, isn't he? He won't go
Uh,
back to the
I'm pretty sure he's Victorian, but I think he actually it would say in
yeah.
his bio from the Eastern Ranges, so
Yeah.
that is a Victorian uh category group. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
whatever they're called.
I said hopefully he'll enjoy retirement with his family, and yeah, I think he got a couple of kids as well.
Yes, he
So
does.
you know, um, it's tough to go without that farewell. Adelaide will do the right thing. They'll get a bit of somewhere in the season, probably next home game. Um, Maybe not the showdown. I think that's Ports, but if it is Adelaide, they might
Let
have some recognition
me
for him.
check
But
for you.
even if it was Ports,
No,
I hope
it is
they have
Adelaide's
a
home.
little.
It is Adelaide's.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, no,
could
I
be
said
then.
hopefully there'll be a bit for him there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
said,
Again, even 2017 onwards, I've always respected him from like for their performance throughout those years. Even when he was
yeah,
co-captain with Tex, and like they were pretty much going through struggle street in those darker years during the pandemic.
yeah,
I thought he really stood up when they needed him to, and I have a lot of respect for that. And I think he's one of the greats of the game, and the game's probably going to really miss him.
yeah, for sure. And as I said, the nice thing about the showdown is I think even Port fans, I think will facing him twice a year will recognise him and hopefully give him a good send off. Because yeah, as I
Yeah,
said,
if they do
absolutely
it
love
this
him.
week, you'd think they'd be polite.
Yeah, for sure. I think they would. Even those feral Port fans might behave themselves for a Rory send off.
They're only feral
I
Port
will
fans if
say,
they're from South Australia, so you're fine.
yeah. Yeah, I will say Rory Slane is also someone who I always try and manage to get in my super coach team, even though I shouldn't. To very varying success. Him and Luke Parker. So I'm also fondly
Yes,
attached to him
two
in
very
that.
injury-prone players right now.
Injury, yeah. It's just like, oh, Parker just needs a couple of more goals per game to be one of the best Supercoach players, and it never really happened. But I love him,
You'll get there. You'll get there.
and Rory, and also um, one of the best hairs in the competition too.
Oh yeah, very
Um,
very silky and attractive.
exactly. I love to see it flowing when he was running hard at the contest.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we're gonna start winding things down, I want you to tell me about what day you're leaving and how much you're gonna get up to whilst you're away.
So I'll be leaving on Wednesday. I'll be spending most of the tomorrow packing up.
Hmm.
Going to the quite. I'll need to be packing your jumpers. As I said, it's been so dry in Perth, and I looked at Newcastle weather. It's been mainly raining, so yeah, it'll be a bit downcast. But again, when you're looking forward to seeing friends, it doesn't matter too much because
Yep.
I'm not really sightseeing as much. I'll spend one day in Sydney, then go up to Newcastle to see my friends.
Hmm.
I'll see, the wedding couple, maybe hopefully at least once before the wedding, busy time for them, so it'd be nice to see him away from it. Also, spending time with another couple of friends. I'll be going to a sword craft thing to actually get my costume for the event because it's fantasy themed.
Oh yeah, so is it like
Very
a
weird.
Red Fair sort of thing?
Kinda, but yeah. So it's weird. It's a May the 4th wedding, but it's not
But
Star
it's
Wars
not
themed.
Star
It's
Wars
fantasy
related.
themed.
Okay,
So
sure.
yeah, exactly. It's just it's a. Oh, honestly, they've got so much talented cosplayers and artists in their friends group. So it'll be nice. I'm getting a costume from them, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah, as I said, chilling on Sunday, doing whatever anyone's available to, and then heading back on Monday. Um, yeah, straight from Newcastle to the airport, probably landing at about 5 Perth time. So
It's not too
I
bad.
come back, eat a bit of dinner, go to sleep.
Sounds like a good plan. For me this week,
Yeah.
it's just about getting through work, finalizing anything that I need for my holiday, which is the week after. Um, finding a special guest to cover you. I have an idea. I have a couple of people I can ask, but I still
Yeah.
need to actually ask. Um, and then yeah, it's just watch the games. This weekend is going to be an incredible game. Like
Oh, it's
weekend
a
to watch. You
behemoth.
are
Yeah.
missing out,
Oh,
but it just means I have more notes to
just.
take.
Luckily, I have someone brilliant recapping the round that I can listen to. Maybe on the flight. Oh no, it won't be the flight back. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, it won't be the flight
Uh,
back because it won't
I'll
go
be looking
until
forward.
I'm
Yeah.
unless if I'm able to take Monday off and we can record early, I might be able to get it up
No,
for you to
don't do it
download.
for me. As I said, I'll look forward to listening to it on Wednesday probably. When I get back. Still be chilling afterwards. So
Yeah, sounds good.
yeah.
And then yeah, it's just organizing everything else for when I go away, so you don't have to stress too much
Mm.
about the process.
Yeah, we'll get some content out for you. We'll try and get everything, at least something up for each week. So look forward to that.
Yeah, so good. And I'll talk about it more next week anyway, so we
Yeah,
should be good for that. So, in
awesome.
that case, I think that is everything for this week. So we will thank you all so much for coming and hang out with us. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Thank you for listening on Spotify. Thank you for listening on YouTube because sometimes you can do that.
Yeah.
Please be sure to again check out our socials. I didn't do a stream last week because I went out on my usual streaming night, so I'm hoping to do it this week. We shall see because it's already kind of late and I don't know how much time I'll have to edit the podcast tonight as we're recording.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I should go live 6:30 p.m. AEST Tuesday nights. It'll be, and then hopefully the same next week as well. It'll be all dependent on how much stuff I have to do for my trip and prepping for podcast stuff. Yeah, I think I don't really have to talk about it all that much. I think that's everything. So, thank you all again so much, and we will see you all. Oh, I will see you all. Psyrick will see you all, but I will see you all next week. Goodbye.